D-May, Svingen, and Donick, 102.5, 106.3 The Game. Broadcasting from the Busy Bee Plumbing, Heating, and Air Conditioning Game Nashville studios, home of the $99 yearly Beehive membership, where the buzz is always about great service. Derek Mason and Adam Vingen here with you. Willie Donick will join us momentarily. We are live from Bridgestone Arena, where the Nashville Predators will host the Calgary Flames tonight at 7 o'clock. Pre-game at 6 o'clock right here on 102.5, 106.3 The Game. The Predators have dropped 7 consecutive games. It is their longest winless streak in more than 11 years. So the Predators are looking for their first win, Derek, in about a calendar month. I believe their last win, which was against the Winnipeg Jets, which was their most impressive performance of the season. The Jets were the number 1 team in the league at the time. Actually, it happened closer than I thought. I was thinking it happened on November 14th for some reason. It was November 23rd. So it's only been a couple of weeks since they won a game. Not a full calendar month. But the Nashville Predators will look to get off of their 7-game winless skid coming up tonight at 7 o'clock.
They have not fared well with Canadian teams the last couple of weeks. They lost the Maple Leafs. Mm-hmm. They lost the Canadians. Mm-hmm. They lost to the Senators. Right. And now up next, the Calgary Flames.
They've already lost to the Flames this season. That was part of that 5-game road trip.
So maybe they shouldn't play Canadian teams anymore.
Unfortunately, in the NHL, you do have to play a Canadian team or two. And we will get into the Predators later in the program. So with the Titans losing to the Jacksonville Jaguars on Sunday, it was a formality. Mm-hmm. We knew that the Tennessee Titans were not going to make the playoffs. But with the loss to the Jags on Sunday, they were formally eliminated from playoff contention. So players who could hold out hope that, hey, maybe we could string some wins together and get ourselves back into the race, make things interesting down the stretch. No, that's not going to happen. In terms of the standings, well, I guess I was about to say that in terms of the standings, the games are meaningless. Well, for fans out there that want the Titans to lose so they can move up in the draft order, these games aren't meaningless. But for the players on the field, in terms of trying to move up the standings, it doesn't matter. They're not making the playoffs.
No.
And what's going to be interesting, Derek, over these next 4 weeks, they have 4 games left in the season, is how they go about their business. Because you were fortunate enough, Derek, that you didn't miss the playoffs too many times in your illustrious NFL career. But we were talking before the show. I was wondering if there was an example of a season where you were in a similar situation, where you knew before the season was over that you weren't going to make the playoffs. Not a situation where if we win this game, the final game of the season, we're in. If we lose, we're out. You knew that you would have 2, 3, 4 games where you were going out on the field. You wanted to play well. You were putting plays on tape. You were playing for a contract, perhaps. But other than that, there really wasn't anything to play for in terms of wins and losses. And you pointed to the 2004 Titans, which finished 5-11 under Jeff Fisher. At the end of that season, your team lost 5 consecutive games down the stretch. I don't know when in that season you were eliminated from postseason contention, but that was the season that came to your mind when you were looking for an example that was similar to these Titans. So if you could go back to that 2004 season, you knew that you were just playing out the string.
I mean, we had it's sort of similar to what the Titans are going through right now. In this respect, the injuries. We were a good team from top to bottom. We had good players. But when you lose your quarterback, you lost your running back from the previous year, Eddie George, who they end up cutting and he ended up going to Dallas. So a part of your leadership is gone. And then these guys that you depend on, they were all dropping like flies. And we held on as long as possible. I think Billy Volek came in and he did a wonderful job, but we just couldn't match team for team. It had gotten so bad that year. And I think this is the year where we end up going. We had so many injuries on our team. Mainly, it was a lot of defensive guys, and we had some key offensive guys out. But we went to Indy one year. That year, I believe it was that year, and we knew there was no way in on God's green earth with Peyton Manning, Marvin Harrison, all those guys that we were going to be able to go down to Indianapolis or up to Indianapolis and win a game. We just knew it. Were we going to play hard? Were we going to give it up? Absolutely yes. But we knew man for man, we couldn't go with them. So what did we do? We pulled out every trick play imagined, onside kicks, everything, because we knew that this was probably the only way that we would be able to sort of get a leg up on the Indianapolis Colts and try to catch them off guard. Well, we did that. And it worked for a minute. It worked. We were up for a minute. And then once all of those fancy trick plays wore off, they end up beating us by like 21 points, somewhere around there. Because ultimately, the best team ends up winning.
If I recall correctly, this was December 5th, 2004. Colts 51.
Yeah.
Titans 24. You were up 24-17 at the end of the first quarter, and we're outscored 34-0 over the final three quarters.
But we knew that, listen, the only shot we got at winning this game is to pull out every play from the playbook, the bottom of the playbook. And Heimerdinger did an excellent job at doing that. Fisher did an excellent job at just game planning and trying to, find some ways to get that hidden yards or extra points. Alan Lowry was a part of it because of special teams and all the stuff that we tried to do at the beginning. It worked for a half. But then once we were all out of those type of plays and it was man on man, we had no shot. Why? Because our roster was depleted of starters, and it was depleted of the guys that were supposed to be the starters that were hurt. They end up getting hurt, the backups. So we were down at times to our third or fourth on the depth chart, corners, our third or fourth on the depth chart inside, guys on the defensive line, as well as guys on the offensive line. We were just decimated as a team. That's why I said from the injury standpoint, I can relate to this team. But as far as that, I don't think there was ever any question of the head coach, the GM, the special teams coach. There was no indication that, anyone would be fired. I mean, if you have a bad season, because we had just come off of a AFC championship game where we lost to the then Oakland Raiders. So you come back, you have a bad season. Nobody's thinking everybody's getting fired. But here's sort of the ironic part about that. We knew that this was the end of a dynasty. We knew this was the end. Like, we knew at the end of the season that guys were going to be let go, veteran guys were going to be let go, and they were going to have to start this thing all over again. So I can't relate to the Titans team this year based upon that. But, I mean, just like any other team, I think whether you're playing in 2025 or back in 2004, when you've been eliminated from the playoffs, you have to find that why now. You always got to have a why. And that's what I ask, young players, like, what is your why? Why are you playing this game? Find your why. And your why, listen, your why can't just be money. And I know that's a big part of it, but your why just can't be money. What is your why? When you got all the money, when you got the new contract and your team's doing, what is your why? Why are you still continuing to play? Are you trying to honor a contract? Because if that's the case, I don't want you on my team. What is your why? And that's what the Titans got to figure out in this situation, because they are mathematically eliminated from the playoffs, and we knew that even before they lost to the Jacksonville Jaguars.
Right, but as a player, you can speak to this as a player in the position that we're in now. We can say they're not making the playoffs, but as long as that little E is not next to your name in the standings, as a player, you are playing like you have hope to make the playoffs.
Yeah, but even when it's there, now again, what is your why? Now it's okay. I know we're not in the playoffs, so why are you playing? What's your why? Do you want? I mean, are you going to stick? Are you going to hang in there with us? Because if you're not, then you're going to show me, and I'm going to make my decision, and you will not be on my team next year. I need to know the guys that are going to stick with this, even though it seems very lean right now. Even though we know we ain't making the playoffs, even if every team loses from here on out, we're still not making the playoffs. So why do you still come to practice? Why do you still go out there and play this game that you're getting paid a lot of money to play? Whether it's millions of dollars or hundreds of thousands of dollars, it's still a lot of money. So the Titans got to figure out their why. The players got to figure it out. The coaches, what they got to understand is that coaches now are really in evaluation mode. Now, because it's not about necessarily winning games moving forward. It's not about that. Do you want to win? Absolutely, you want to win. But it's about who's progressing as a player, who's getting better, who's still coming in, at 6:30 in the morning before anything gets started. Who's still putting in those extra hours? Who's coming in late? Who's missing meetings? Who's not doing the things who's missing training, physical therapy? What guys are missing physical therapy? Because this time of year, when guys are hurt, some guys, if the trainer says you need to be in here at 6 o'clock in the morning, 6:30 in the morning, you've been hurt for the last 8 weeks, and you've been coming at 6:30 in the morning because your team is still mathematically still in the playoffs. So you want to be there. You want to try to get healthy. Now that you know your team out, are you still coming in at 6:30? Because now if you're coming in at 7, we got a problem. I want to see the guys that still stick to their regimen, even when we're losing, that are still coming in at 6:30 in the morning, that are still showing up to meetings 5 minutes early. When you start to show up to meetings right at the bell, or you start to show up at meetings 30 seconds late, a special teams meeting, then no. We can't have that. We can't.
One thing you've talked about, Derek, throughout the season when the team was losing is you have to be wary of their becoming divisions in the locker room. And after the Titans lost, and I know this full well as a reporter who's been in a lot of losing locker rooms and dressing rooms, in those moments, you don't really have time to collect your thoughts. You don't have time to rehearse a response to a question. You're really speaking off the cuff. And there were some post-game quotes that I think caught some people's attention after the game against the Jaguars. The one I saw that I think made the most waves was Jeffrey Simmons. David, if you will, this was Jeffrey Simmons after the game on Sunday talking about Will Levis and the offensive line.
This sucks, man. Apparently, we're not in a position and we don't do enough to win games. And all the way around, I'm tired of seeing our quarterback on the ground. I'm tired of seeing him squirreling on the damn ground, actually. Getting his block knocked off by their edge guys. And I don't know, man. Like, it's frustrating to see that, and especially right before the half. We know we throwing the ball. Like, we know they're finna rush. It's frustrating. Like I said, at the end of the day, I'm tired of saying we got to do better. We got to play better. It just, I don't know. I don't have no answers. Just complimentary football wasn't there.
So that was Jeffrey Simmons. It was sort of hard to hear, but he said, I'm tired of seeing our quarterback on the ground. I'm tired of seeing him squirreling on the ground. He mentioned the play right before half, the Hail Mary, where Josh Hines-Allen blew up Will Levis, re-injuring his shoulder. He was able to come back into the game, but I think all of us can agree that when that play happened, we're like, well, he's done for the day. So that was Jeffrey Simmons after the game. Yesterday, Brian Callahan was asked about if he has any concerns about the locker room splintering now that the season is effectively over.
Are you concerned at all about any splintering? Because yesterday, maybe it was heat of the moment, but some guys said you have to start playing for yourself. And Jeff was talking about how he's tired of seeing the quarterback, laying on the ground. And other guys are saying, 2 turnovers and 6 points is just not enough. Yeah,
those things are all, that's accurate. I mean, 2 turnovers and the way the defense played and only have 6 points certainly is is something that I'm just as irritated about as I'm sure they are. Yeah, and then look, when you're out of the playoff contention and you're trying to fight, there is an element that guys do. This is their job. They are paid professionals. Their job is to play football. My job is to coach it. That's a part of it, and it ultimately, like I said earlier, that these next 4 games are important for us. They're important for what comes next. They're important for the type of foundation and culture we're trying to continue to build, and we're trying to set ourselves up to do things the right way. So when we come back in the next phase of this, that we're in a better place than we were when we started, and that's the idea. Outside of that, that's football. I mean, guys, your film is your resume. They have to play well because some of these guys are looking for new contracts. They're on 1-year contracts. That's all a part of it. So I don't take any issue with that. I don't look at that as splintering at all. I do think one of the strengths of our team is the way that they do stick together and do play for each other and do things the right way in that regard. So all a part of it when you get to this point in the season and you are where we're at. But I got a lot of confidence in those guys and the way that they go about their business and how connected they've been over the course of this season, despite the adversity. So I feel really good about our locker room and where they are. Again, they should be frustrated just as much as I am.
That was Brian Callahan yesterday. Derek, there was a part of that clip that got you chuckling a little bit.
Yeah. I mean, listen, Jeffrey Simmons, he's going to say what he's going to say. But what he has to understand, listen, man, you're not doing your job either. You played a great game the other day. I'm like, man, that's the Jeffrey Simmons 2 weeks last week
against the Texans.
Against the Texans. I was like, man, that's the Jeffrey Simmons that got that big contract.
And he followed it up with a stinker against the Commanders.
Exactly. So it's like, man, like, okay, cool.
You were hard on Simmons after the loss to the Commanders.
This is what we're going to see from Simmons all season. I'm like, okay, we got Jeffrey back. And then he comes back out and lay an egg. And then then this prior week, he's a no-show again. Listen, control what you can control. That's what I would tell Jeffrey. Control what you can control. You can't control Will Levis getting knocked down. We all know. We all this and again, this is not like something that has just happened. We knew this, 10 games ago. Hell, we knew this at the beginning of the season. What was going to happen with him? Because they didn't upgrade the right side of the offensive line the way we felt they needed to. Now they went out there and they got guys, but they didn't get guys for true competition to push one another. So Jeffrey has to understand, man, control what you can control. Leave that other stuff to the coaches, okay? Because those same players could have came back. It's like, Jeff, I'm tired of seeing the running back run up the gut on you. I'm tired of seeing, teams that can't run the ball. They run the ball on us. I get tired of seeing y'all not be able to get to the quarterback when we need a play. I'm tired of seeing when we're inside the red zone, y'all can't stop nobody. I'm tired of seeing that. I'm tired of seeing y'all not getting sacks. I'm tired of seeing y'all not getting turnovers. Yeah, y'all have gotten a few the last couple of games, but what was before that? Nothing. So, again, Brian Callahan sits here and says, we got a great locker room. That's not a great locker room, Brian Callahan. I don't know what locker rooms you're used to, but that is not one. I said this last year or a year before. When everybody was coming out, the locker room's great. Yes, this and that when Vrabel was there. Yes, this and that. And I'm like, okay, yeah, they may just be right. But anybody can say that when you're winning, when everything's going great. I want to see when y'all start losing games, when injuries start to occur. Is that locker room sticking together? And Lord and behold, when that start happening, you start hearing stuff come out of that building, players talking after game, this and that. I understand the locker room. I know what it's like. I know a good locker room, a really good locker room, and I can feel when a locker room isn't good.
So what do you think about this locker room?
This is a locker room that is waiting to point fingers. They are waiting to point fingers in this situation.
Hold that thought. I think that's really interesting, and we will get to that on the other side. 615-737-1025. We'll get your thoughts on the Titans. You can call us, text us on our phone and text lines driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com. Nashville's best deal this week is 312 Pizza Company in Germantown. 312 Pizza Company serves the best pizza in town, as well as Chicago-style eats like Chicago dogs, Italian beef sandwiches, and more. Check them out at 371 Monroe Street in Germantown or order takeout online at 312pizzaco.com. Head to theGameNashville.com/deals now to get half off a $30 gift card to 312 Pizza Company while supplies last. segment, but the tune into the Chase McCabe and Big Joe show tomorrow from 9 to 11 a.m., I should say, for your chance to qualify to win a pair of tickets in the all-inclusive Eurostone Club at Bridgestone Arena and see Brett Eldridge live on Friday, December 20th. That is a week from this Friday. The Brett Eldridge concert ticket contest is supplied by Green Trees, a family-owned cannabis company. Check them out online at greentrees.com. Derek Mason, Adam Bingen, joined by Willie Donick. A programming note, usually we speak to Tim Hasselback in the spot, but Tim has a conflict, so Tim will not be joining us today. We hope to have him later in the week. Always love getting Tim's insights. Willie, are you there? You're there. He's not there. He's running.
He's here, but he's not
physically here. He's not on the air quite yet. He'll let us know.
Yeah, he'll let us know. And David, I do, because Willie was taking care of his Predator duties. So I want Willie to hear that clip again in a couple of seconds, in a couple of minutes.
Of Simmons or Callahan?
Of Simmons.
Okay.
And then we will get Willie's response to that. And then we need to play the Callahan response to what Jeffrey Simmons said as well. Once Willie get himself in his mic.
Yes. Ready. So where we left it was we were discussing a comment from Jeffrey Simmons. There were other comments, but this was the one I could find on video, and it wasn't the greatest audio quality. But it was Jeffrey Simmons saying, I'm tired of seeing my quarterback on the ground. I'm tired of seeing my quarterback squirreling on the ground. Mentioned the play right before halftime, the Hail Mary, where Will Levis gets annihilated by, there he is. Okay, there he is. There's Willie.
Hello.
The magic of live radio. He mentioned the play right before half, the Hail Mary attempt where Josh Hines-Allen obliterated Will Levis. We thought he injured his shoulder. He did, but he was able to continue in the game. We then played the clip from Brian Callahan about if he's concerned if there's any potential splintering that could go on in the locker room as a result of the fact that they've been eliminated from the playoffs. And this is where it got juicy. Derek said, this is a locker room just waiting to point fingers at each other. So let's get your thoughts on that, Derek, and then we'll replay those clips for Will.
Yeah, and let me sort of rephrase what I said. There are some in that locker room that is just itchy to point fingers. I'm not saying everybody in that locker room, because it usually is only a few guys that tend to sort of, point fingers or try to blame the other side or try to blame another player. There's always just a few of them, and it's not the whole. But because there's a few, and a few talk loud, as we know, sometimes the few get misconstrued as everybody, and that is indeed not the case. But in this situation again, Jeffrey Simmons, worry about your side of the ball. I can't remember, and listen, guys will tell you this, like veteran guys will tell you this, like, listen, guys that are truly in it and it's truly about the team, don't criticize the other side of the ball. You don't do that. We just do our job. Don't criticize them in public or anything else, because their job is just as hard as our job. And if we're a 4-11 team or 3-whatever team, and it's not like we all are doing such a fabulous and fantastic job. If we were, we wouldn't have the record that we're having. So you are breaking cardinal sins here. You're breaking them. It's a cardinal sin to point fingers at the other side of the ball when you're not doing your damn job the way you need to be doing it. So that is the beginning of a locker room being divided. When you're supposedly leader, the guy you've deemed as your leader. I'm not saying he's their leader or not. I'm just saying the guy that you deemed as your leader, the guy that ran Carthon, said on the radio waves that Jeffrey's one of our leaders. This is the guy that has been repeatedly saying things that would cause one to believe that your locker room isn't together. The one guy that is supposed to be the guy that is bringing everybody together is basically telling, like, y'all not doing your job, offensive line, and offensive coordinator / coach. Why did you throw the damn ball? Why did you throw it? So you're pointing fingers on that other side, but you're not pointing the fingers at yourself. Because I could have said, well, Jeff, you and the defensive line didn't hold up. Y'all allowed Etienne to score the game-winning touchdown. What's up with that? Why y'all couldn't, stand up tall and stop that? They were playing without both of their tackles, the Jacksonville Jaguars. But yet and still, they were able to run the ball in from the 10-yard line for the game-winning touchdown. See, things like that causes a division in your locker room, because those guys on the offensive side, they may not say it out in public, but they're like, man, shut the hell up. Like, you do your job before you start telling us about. I'm telling you, that's how it is.
So let's play the clip so Willie can hear it. David, this is the clip of Jeffrey Simmons. And again, it's a bit hard to hear. We'll clean it up. But this was Jeffrey Simmons after the game on Sunday.
This sucks, man. Apparently, we're not in a position, and we don't do enough to win games. And all the way around, I'm tired of seeing our quarterback on the ground. Tired of seeing him squirreling on the damn ground, actually. Getting his block knocked off by their edge guys. And I don't know, man. Like, it's frustrating to see that, and especially right before the half. We know we're throwing the ball. Like, we know they're finna rush. It's frustrating. Like I said, at the end of the day, I'm tired of saying we got to do better. We got to play better. It just, I don't know. I don't have no answers. Just complimentary football wasn't it.
Well, you said you ain't had no answers, but you gave an answer. Like, Jeffrey, stop it, man.
I always like to hear when somebody does that. If you're going to give examples, like the play before the end of the half, that's a pretty specific thing that really, at the end of the day, that was not the difference in the game, other than unless there's issues going forward with Levis' shoulder, which I guess we'll have to find out this week at practice. But I like to hear a guy come in and say, I got to do more too. If you preface it by saying, and look, I got to do more. I'm not having a great year. None of us are having great years. So it starts with me. I like that. Then the other stuff plays better, where that just seemed like a real frustrated guy venting and not coming across. I'm sure he feels like he's got to play better, but you have to say it, I think. This is, again, media relations, dealing with the media one-on-one. I feel like I teach a class of how it's going to play.
And
it doesn't play well.
You're right, Willie.
You're saying.
Yeah, you're right, Willie, about that. But you are a veteran player, Jeffrey.
Right.
You know what to
going down the
say.
list of
Yeah,
offensive struggles.
exactly.
That's not smart as the defensive guy.
Absolutely. And that is all
Unless
I'm
you're
saying.
saying, hey, and our defense has got to do better. Like
Yeah.
you have to balance it at least.
Mhm.
But it was more unbalanced towards it. It really leans. You read between the lines, and it's a little.
He
more,
didn't take
our
accountability
offense
for
scored a
what
touchdown.
Yeah.
We win.
he didn't take accountability for
At least in
his
that clip. At
defense.
least
Yes.
in that clip, he did.
Yeah.
He didn't play
take it.
everything.
Yeah, exactly.
At least
In that clip, he did not take responsibility. Now there may be other clips where subsequently he decided that he wanted to incorporate himself into the equation. But in that scenario, what his teammates are hearing now is, "Oh, you're blaming us for this, for the loss last night, where the loss Sunday during the day." When in fact, none of us did good. None of us. Like, don't just point at the offensive line, because frankly, listen, last week's game, that was the least amount of times he got pressure.
Right. And as
That's
you
right.
pointed out,
Seriously.
Jacksonville lost their tackle on the morning of the game.
Mhm.
And I didn't see them get a lot of hits on Mac Jones. Did
No,
they?
Not to my knowledge. It's like
They didn't get a lot of hits. He
listen,
wasn't harassed back there.
you need to stop. But this is what happens when you perceive your locker room to be one way, but then you start losing and reality kicks in that it's not. And then the way that, listen, Big Joe said this, and I didn't believe it then, and I really don't. It's like it's hard for me to believe now. But Big Joe said something during camp that the day that Jeffrey Simmons did all that crap,
Yeah.
in
Stirred
camp,
it up.
and stirred it
Yeah.
up, and Brian Callahan did not throw his ass out of practice, you would have sent the message right there, like right then and there. Because I tell you what, I tend to believe that Vrabel would have said, "You out of practice, you're gone."
I think that
Even
was
as a
Vrabel's.
first year coach,
I think that was Vrabel's rule.
yeah,
fight
like
practice,
you fight, you're out, because
because
that's
if
what
you
it would
fight
be in the game.
yes,
You would be out of practice. But Brian Callahan is he wants to tiptoe, walk on eggshells, and want to be friends with everybody at the beginning. That you don't set what
Set
what
the
is it?
bar.
Yeah, you don't set the bar.
precedent.
Set the precedent
Yeah.
that, listen, I don't care if you're Jeffrey Simmons or you're the third guy on the depth chart. If you fight in practice, you will be told to go in the locker room, because the league don't care who you are when that happens. But when he didn't do that, he set a precedent of, Big Jeff, you can say what you can do and say whatever you want to say, because we don't have many players like you. So I got to give you a pass each and every time. And it seems like every time he makes excuses for Jeffrey Simmons when he says something. I'm not saying Jeffrey Simmons is a bad person or anything else, but Jeff has to understand, just like the head coach has to understand, certain things you just cannot say and certain things you can't allow as a head coach. The minute you allow Jeffrey Simmons to do that in training camp and you didn't kick his ass out of practice, you set a precedent.
Well, one thing we've talked about, Willie, and we mentioned it not too long ago, was that we knew that this team had those vocal leaders, not just in the locker room, but they were good spokesmen for the team through the press, like Derrick Henry, like Kevin Byard, like Ryan Tannehill. Go back further, Jarrell Casey. From afar, I've always had this feeling that Jeffrey Simmons and unless I'm missing someone obvious, there really isn't that person. It's not the quarterback right now. That's
No.
usually who you look to, right? It's not the quarterback. They have veterans in the secondary, but they're new to the team and they're currently injured. So Jeffrey Simmons might be that guy by default, but Derek knows this well. Even if we're questioning Jeffrey Simmons' leadership capabilities, they're not being questioned in the locker room. And there are players in the locker room who will look to Jeffrey Simmons as an example. And I'm sure you've experienced it in your career, Derek, that not everybody's made out to be that leader, and young players are impressionable. Like, they see how Jeffrey Simmons conducts himself. That's how they might conduct themselves later on.
Let's say this though: it is hard when you're 3-10.
Yes.
To keep going out there and talk and being the guy that has to talk.
Yes.
Roman Yossi's been put in that position all too often this year, and it's not
fun.
He hasn't
not fun.
had to do that much. They've been a winning team, not a Stanley Cup winning team, but their teams have won a lot since he's been the captain. This is new territory for him, having to go and answer, and he does it. You can this is again where I wonder what is the value of being able to be effective in those situations, because they're tough, right? Because every time you step in it and you say something wrong, everybody's going to just jump. See, this is why they're 3-10, or this is why they're way below what their expectation is. So that's not an easy job, but some are more natural at being able to do that. Some grow into it. I would say that Derrick Henry was a little shy when he first came into the league, but as he got more comfortable doing it, he became outstanding. I thought in those situations. I think we've cited a lot of examples of that. It is a little bit of a learned thing how to deal with yourself in the press
It's a
conference.
learned thing, but it's not a hard thing. It is not a hard thing. Now, it may be, irritating at sometimes that you got to keep going out here and talk about a loss. It may be irritating, or it may, you may not want to do it, but it's not a hard thing to do. It's really not. I did it for damn near 15 years. It's not hard to do, because in your mind, I've said this and I will continue to say it. You control the interview, not the person that is interviewing you. You control that. I was told that my second or third year in the league. They said, Derrick, listen, you got to understand. And they were talking to everybody, but I'm just saying, you control. Don't make the interviewer make you feel as if they're in control of the interview, because they're not. You take your time. You think about your question. They're not going anywhere. Because they want the soundbite.
Yeah.
So they're not going anywhere. And if it takes you a couple of minutes to gather your thoughts, then do that. Because they're going to, all 15 of them are going to sit in front of you and wait. That's just what they're going to do, because that's their job. Jeffrey Simmons needs to learn how to, especially after games, just take a deep breath, sit there, let the question be asked of him instead of him thinking about his answer as the question is being asked. Listen to it, then take your time, and then answer. And I guarantee you wouldn't have said what you said about the offensive line. Because basically, you were pointing at the offensive line, said it's the offensive line fault we lost. That's basically what you're saying.
Sorry, Derek. 615-737-1025. By the way, Mac Jones pressured 10 times on 34 dropbacks, 1 sack on Sunday. 615-737-1025.
1 sack with your tackle waking up sick, where you have a game plan. You're game planning to have that tackle in there. He's gone. To give up 1 sack, if I'm Jacksonville, I am saying offensive line coach, offensive game plan, great job protecting the quarterback.
615-737-1025. So we've heard from Brian Callahan. We'll play that clip again coming back from break on how he handles, these next 4 games and tries to ward off any splintering in the locker room. But there was something that was said on the broadcast. I heard Jared talk about it yesterday. Derek, it kind of falls in line with what you're talking about with Brian Callahan and Jeffrey Simmons during training camp that I want to get into, because I do think this is a big part of the next 4 weeks. 615-737-1025. Willie Donick, Derek Mason, Adam Vingan, 1025-1063. The Game.
Hey, this is Derek Mason, and you heard me tell you about Dr. Lodge and his staff over at Cool Springs MD for some time. If you have set out to lose weight, chances are it's not the first time. Setting a resolution to shed some extra pounds only to face disappointment, people. But we don't want that to happen to you any longer. And that's why I'm telling you to go see my good people over at Cool Springs MD. And Dr. Lodge and his team understands the frustration of this cycle, and that is why they're offering a different approach to weight loss. Their comprehensive weight loss program is led by Dr. Jeffrey Lodge and addresses the root cause of weight gain with tailored nutrition, exercise, blood test supplements, and more. They will customize a program specific to you. So connect with Dr. Lodge at CoolSpringsMD.com today to schedule your appointment for a personalized weight loss plan just for you. That's Cool Springs MD, where your weight loss journey becomes a success story.
Are you concerned at all about any, are you concerned at all about any splintering? Because yesterday, maybe it was heat of the moment, but some guys said you have to start playing for yourself. And Jeff was talking about how he's tired of seeing the quarterback, laying on the ground. And other guys are saying, 2 turnovers and 6 points is just not enough.
Yeah, those things are all, that's accurate. I mean, 2 turnovers and the way the defense played and only have 6 points certainly is something that I'm just as irritated about as I'm sure they are. And look, when you're out of the playoff contention and you're trying to fight, there is an element that guys do. This is their job. They are paid professionals. Their job is to play football. My job is to coach it. That's a part of it. And it ultimately, like I said earlier, that these next 4 games are important for us. They're important for what comes next. They're important for the type of foundation and culture we're trying to continue to build. And we're trying to set ourselves up to do things the right way. So when we come back in the next phase of this, that we're in a better place than we were when we started. And that's the idea. Outside of that, that's football. I mean, guys, your film is your resume. They have to play well because some of these guys are looking for new contracts. They're on 1-year contracts. That's all a part of it. So I don't take any issue with that. I don't look at that as splintering at all. I do think one of the strengths of our team is the way that they do stick together and do play for each other and do things the right way in that regard. So all a part of it when you get to this point in the season and you are where we're at. But I got a lot of confidence in those guys and the way that they go about their business and how connected they've been over the course of this season, despite the adversity. So I feel really good about our locker room and where they are. Again, they should be frustrated just as much as I am.
That was Brian Callahan yesterday addressing whether he's concerned of any potential divisions in the locker room. Willie Donick, Derek Mason, Adam Vingan here with you. Derek, you went back all the way to training camp.
Mm-hmm.
We remember that day with Jeffrey Simmons gets thrown out of practice, gets into an argument with a colleague of ours, and it was not a good day for Jeffrey Simmons. But Brian Callahan did not throw Jeffrey Simmons out of practice that day. There was something that was said on the broadcast. It was a passing comment during a break in the action, and I actually heard this during the game. Jared and Ian were good enough to clip it because Jared talked about it yesterday. David, if you will, this was a clip of the broadcast crew talking about maybe a change in the way that Brian Callahan is addressing his team.
And a flag is down.
False start. Offense, number 78. 5-yard penalty. Second down.
Common theme for Tennessee. Penalties, especially against the offense. That's the 5th false start this year against Petit Frere.
Listen, we talked to Brian Callahan about the penalties that the Titans were going through and how they've struggled. First in the NFL when it comes to penalties. He said his voice changed with the guys this week. He was a little bit more stern with his tone and tried to get them to understand it's their own mistakes that's holding them back from winning football games.
You go back to Callahan and the point Jason was making. Callahan told us he got after the guys this week, and Will Levis told us that the tone definitely changed with Callahan, and Callahan said that his demeanor is pretty consistent, but this week he had to show the team that he does have some bite. He was more intense, used some choice words with his team, and he thought the message was received well. We'll see how it plays out today for Tennessee.
Spoiler, it did not play out well because the Titans lost, but I did think...
how were the penalties? I didn't feel like they had a lot of penalties on Sunday. I didn't go check exactly.
They had a few false start penalties. I don't really like holding penalties. That's a part of the game. It happens. It's the pre and the post.
It certainly wasn't as bad as it was a couple of weeks ago when they had 11 penalties in the first half.
Well, we went through it. They are among the most penalized teams in the league, either first or second. Last I checked, it changes week to week, and there's different ways to calculate it. When you really get into, like you were saying, D. Mace, the pre-snap penalties versus penalties that result in first downs, penalties that negate big plays. Like, it seems like they are way on the wrong side of the ledger on that. So I don't blame Callahan for saying, I got to try something different here. Because what we're doing is not getting the message across.
But my question to you, Derek, is it too little too late to have a shift in tone? When I heard that, I often relate to being a young parent. And I know that if I talk to my son one way and all of a sudden change my tone, that message may not be received. So we knew that Brian Callahan would handle things differently than Mike Vrabel. On the outside, they're two completely different personalities. But yeah, right. To put it lightly. But when I heard that, I was like, why wait until now?
You know what it's like. Okay, Callahan says, "Oh, now after what 15 weeks, now you get a bite in your
right." Well, that was their
voice.
13th game.
Yeah, don't nobody respect that. They listen to you and be like, whatever. Yeah, okay, yeah, it's going in one ear and out the other. Yeah, coach. All right, whatever. You decided after 15 weeks, 14 weeks to now get a bite. Listen, good to great coaches when they come in, and I'm only speaking from experience, and I had 2 great experiences with 2 great coaches. One is considered the best coach ever to coach a college football game, and the other is considered one of the greatest coaches in the National Football League, Nick Saban and John Harbaugh. When they came in, they say, listen, this is my show now. Things are going to change around here. That old stuff y'all used to do, we're not doing that no more. I'm going to show you that this is my team now. Like, we're going to weed out all of this stuff. We're going to become a team. That's one thing I'm going to make sure happens. There's not going to be one guy over the other. We're all in this together. And if we all go down, we're all going down together. It's not like, oh, you're going down, but you're going to be saved. No, if we all go down, we all going down together. And if we all survive, we're all surviving together. That's how Nick Saban was, and that's how John Harbaugh was. They came into situations like, we're not having that. Even with leaders, I'm going to sit down and I'm going to talk to the leaders and tell them what I expect. But we're not having that. When you do things that I deem as detrimental to the team, you're going to be out, or you're gonna have to sit the bench, or you're getting kicked out of practice. Saban did it. People didn't like it, but he did it. And John Harbaugh did it. People didn't like it. Some of the players didn't like it, but he did it. But then at the end, they respected him for it. They respected him for it, Adam. They respected him for it, Willie. It may have been hard at the beginning, but they expected it from him. You can't come in, walking on eggshells, trying to make friends. I don't want to ruffle anybody's feathers. I'm going to let them sort of do what they want to do. We'll figure it all out. No, you got to come in with a stern voice and set a tempo. Not to say that you are sort of like, it's my way or the highway, but obviously what was done in the past doesn't work.
Okay.
So now I got to make sure I weed all that stuff out, and y'all know that, hey, listen, I am the leader of this team from a head coaching standpoint. Now, what we have leaders within the locker room, but if you do certain things, I am not going to say then, oh, it's okay for you to fight and practice, but that guy can't do it. I'm going to kick him out. Then after a while, people are looking at you like, man, whatever.
Okay. But let me say this, because I agree with everything you said. That's how I was taught to play. I expected that from the coaches I played for. I respected the coaches that did have those policies that you hope lead to discipline, toughness, teamwork, etc. Standards that you set, little things. But remember this. What was everybody talking about the day that Brian Callahan took the microphone as the head coach? That, hey, it's a new era. We don't want Mike Vrabel and all the discipline and the hard sort of that. You don't coach like that anymore. And I did say that day. I was like, I don't know, man. You got to have a balance. You can be the player's coach. You can be, there was a line of questioning, right? And I think the organization was selling it, that we're going in a different direction from Vrabel. And I think we all understood that was a tough call. And Vrabel, maybe time was up. It was time to make a change. And you go in a different direction most of the time when you make a change. But there is something to be said for the old school within reason, right? Not abusing players and not like Bobby Knight and stuff like that. But there is a standard that has to be set. So this is a rookie head coach who is young, who I think is learning that, be communicative, be the modern new age coach. But at the same time, you have to have discipline, attention to detail, and there's got to be ramifications for it.
615-737-1025. We will continue the conversation about Brian Callahan Coming up next, Willie Donick, Derek Mason, Adam Vingan, 102.5, 106.3, The Game.
All right, let's talk Loan Pronto. Stop letting that high interest debt weigh you down. For 2025, you can have it paid off in just a few days thanks to Loan Pronto's new Rapid Equity Loan. So if you're a homeowner, imagine a completely hassle-free way to cash out your home equity. No appraisals, no paperwork, no waiting. Instant approvals, low fixed rates, fast transfers. You can get cash, and then you can pay off the credit card bill. You could start a home improvement project, whatever you need that cash for. Call Loan Pronto and see how much you can qualify for. And by this time next week, even before the holidays get going, you could be credit card debt free. Call 615-499-5780 for the info. That's 615-499-5780 or go to loanpronto.com. That's loanpronto.com. Equal housing lender, NMLS 166-1781 on approved credit, NMLSconsumeraccess.org.
D. Mace, Finken, and Donick, 102.5, 106.3 The Game, broadcasting from the Busy Bee Plumbing, Heating, and Air Conditioning Game Nashville studios, home of the $99 yearly Beehive membership, where the buzz is always about great service. Willie Donick, Derek Mason, and Adam Vingan, live from Bridgestone Arena. The Predators are back home for a game. They just got back from a 3-game road trip. They'll play 2 more on the road later this week, but they're making a pit stop back at Bridgestone Arena tonight to host the Calgary Flames. Puck drop at 7, pregame at 6, right here on 102.5, 106.3 The Game, of course. On Tuesdays, Barry Trotz joins Jared Stillman at 5 o'clock. I look forward to that conversation, as I'm sure all of you do as well. So we were just talking about Brian Callahan. You know what? I saw a funny tweet yesterday from Gentry Estes of the Tennessean. And I'm going to try to find it because I want to make sure I do it justice. He tweeted yesterday. So today, the coaches for the Titans and Preds were each asked about their job security within about an hour of each other. What a time, huh? Nashville sports fans?
When both of your coaches are being questioned
Right.
about their job security.
Right.
Yeah.
And look, it's been rough for both teams. We'll get into the Predators here in a little bit. But Brian Callahan was asked the question yesterday. He is 3-10 in his first season as a head coach in the NFL. And inevitably, when a team struggles, whether you're a first-year coach, Andrew Brunette is a second-year coach here. Callahan is a first-year head coach here, and in general, this is his first head coaching job. The NFL, the NHL, sports in general, I like the term that Andrew Brunette used yesterday. It's terminal. There will inevitably come a day when you lose your job. You just hope to push it as far down the road as possible. But Brian Callahan was asked about his job security yesterday. This is part of what he said.
You feel certain there is a future
Oh, what do you mean?
for you?
Oh, yeah, I don't worry about that stuff. That's not for me to worry about. I do everything every day to do my job the best way I possibly can. I put everything into this as much as there's nobody that thinks about how to build this program and what we need to do more than I do. And so, yeah, I don't worry myself with anything other than that at this point. And again, there's things that I can't control. And so I don't focus on that. I focus on what it's going to take to build a program that and build the foundation to a program that's going to allow us to have success in the future. That's my only focus. That's the only thing I think about.
So that was Brian Callahan yesterday. He also said he doesn't feel like he's coaching for his job. That's not the approach that he takes over these next 4 games. But I thought this was interesting from the Tennessean, from Nick Suss. He wrote that from 1980 through 2010, only 12 coaches were fired for a bad debut campaign. There have been 12 coaches fired during or after year 1 since 2011, including 5 in the last 3 cycles. Now, Suss did not list the 5. I believe I have the 5.
Okay.
That were fired after 1 year.
That were fired
Okay.
during or after 1 year. Frank Reich.
And this is since what year?
He said, so Nick Suss said there have been 5 in the last 3 coaching cycles that have been fired during or after their first season.
What is a coaching cycle?
Is
1
it
year?
3 years?
I guess it might be every year.
Is it every year? Or
So in the
every
last
3
3 years, there's been 5 coaches
No, I
fired after
can't.
1 year.
I believe I have them.
Okay.
And we can double
It
check
may be.
with the years. Frank Reich with the Carolina Panthers.
Right.
Yeah.
Urban Meyer with the Jacksonville Jaguars.
Mm-hmm.
Nathaniel Hackett with the Denver Broncos.
Mm-hmm.
And both Lovie Smith and David Culley in Houston.
David
Ye-
Culley was never had a chance. That poor guy.
But he does fall into this
He
category.
is a Commodore. I'm backing up
Yeah.
because he was a
He does
Commodore
fall-
quarterback at one time.
But listen, the common thread with all of those coaches is the quarterback. I know Frank Wright was his is a little bit different because you're talking about the Heisman Trophy winner in Bryce Young, but that was his first year. And then what did they do subsequently before getting Bryce Young? They traded away McCaffrey. They traded away DJ Moore. They did all of this stuff just so they can draft their quarterback and then not have anybody he can throw it to, or not have anybody that can protect him. So, was he probably the scapegoat, Frank Wright? Yeah, but it doesn't seem like from the outside he and the quarterback had any rapport together. So, you look at that, and then you look at Lovie. they didn't have a quarterback. They were playing with Davis Mills, I think, at the time. And the only reason I think they fired him is because he went out and won the last game when they didn't want him to win the last
So
game.
I believe I have the years.
Okay.
So we can go over this. David Culley was 2021.
Right. That was the height of the Deshaun Watson
Yeah.
debacle, where he was there as a ghost, showing up every day just so he could,
collect
be
the
there
money, I
or
don't
whatever.
know.
But he wasn't playing. He told them he wasn't going to play for them. So that was an impossible situation to be in for Culley, and he
So
took all of the rap.
So someone texted in and asked about San Francisco because I think Chip Kelly was fired after 1 year. Jim Tom Sula was fired after 1 year. I'm just looking
At the
over the
last
past 3
three.
years.
Yeah, okay.
So David Culley was 2021 with Houston. Urban Meyer was 2021 with Jacksonville. Nathaniel Hackett was 2022 with Denver. Lovie Smith was 2022 with Houston. And Frank Reich was 2023 with Carolina.
So Denver had the chance to get Peyton.
And they got him.
Hackett had a lot of games at the end of the game where they screwed it up. That was Russell Wilson, right? That was the first.
Wasn't it the first game they took him out and kicked they had an opportunity to go for it. He kicked a field goal or punted it away, something like that.
I will say this. That's more than I would have thought after 1 year, but and people are already naming other guys from the past. I mean, famously, Lou Holtz came out of college 1 year in the 70s to coach the Jets. I remember as a kid going, Lou Holtz coached the Jets? What? And he didn't last through the whole season. He was right back in college the next year. He's like, I don't like this pro stuff. But I think it's a bad look if you bail on your coach after 1 year. After you did all of this, you had this long, passionate. Do we need to bring out the press release again from Amy Adams?
You're right.
We did the other day, and we talked about how she talked about all these young up-and-coming players they had, the quarterback. So for her to then do an about face on the coach she brought in, I don't think is a good look.
Well,
it does happen, I guess, but I don't think it's a good look.
Well, I do have the press release when she hired Brian Callahan, if you would like to look at it.
But I mean, whether it's sort of the perception of the fan base. I think because of how she has done business over the last 3 years.
The term you use, Willie, to describe Amy Adams Strunk, and I believe it is an accurate statement, is wild card.
Yes.
There is always the wild card in all of this.
And that's why the questions are coming up, whether, she gives Brian Callahan another year, because they did it with Malarkey. They said Malarkey was the coach. He ended up getting fired at the end of the season. They did it with John Robinson. They signed him to a new deal. Then they end up subsequently firing him. They did it with Mike Vrabel. They signed him to a new deal, fired the GM, and said, oh, yeah, these two guys are going to work well together. They're going to work well to collaborative. And they end up firing him the next season at the end of the season. So you're right, Willie. She's the wild card.
But don't you think
people are not looking at it like he has stability, like he has job security.
Urban Meyer, for example, right? Brought in as that was a wild card, right? Coming in from college. That was a little bit like the Lou Holtz. It just was oil and water. He was not cut out to be an NFL coach, and it was obvious, probably even to Urban Meyer. And then he had all the the stuff at the bar that got out on video, just embarrassing stuff. It was a complete train wreck.
Shoot your shot, man. That's all I'm saying.
For Brian Callahan, who has been a coach that has been groomed, he's the son of a coach. He has moved up the ranks. He's earned this job, but he is young. To turn your back on him after 1 year and just to think he was going to be the perfect head coach, I think that would be very short-sighted. You hope that when you hire a young coach like that he is going to grow into it and get better year by year. And he hasn't had a lot to hang his hat on this year, right? And there's a lot that has gone wrong. Hopefully he gets better for it, but I just think to even have the discussion now that would not be a good look on the organization at this point.
Well, it wouldn't. It's not a good look, but I think some are, some people have, sort of because of her past has, made this a topic of discussion because, Under normal circumstances, you don't expect your first year head coach to be fired or even him think that his job is in jeopardy or even people questioning whether his job is in jeopardy. But because of some of the past moves you make after basically saying, this is our guy, I'm signing this guy to a new contract, and then you subsequently, not even a year later, you fire the guy that you just signed the contract. And then the next following season, you fired the guy, again, the head coach that you just signed an extension to. So when stuff like that happens, it's almost like people are just waiting on that cavalier type of move that you will make. And some people may, some fans may want it. And some fans may be like you, Willie, and frankly, like me. Like, listen, he needs another opportunity because that first year is learning. You're learning the things you can do and the things you can't do, especially on game day as a head coach. You're learning your roster. So that second year, you just think, okay, that it should be a better year. Now I can start evaluating as the second year approach. But I don't think his job security should be in question. I do believe he needs to be, and it's sort of, you hate saying it because it's not like these guys are little kids. He needs to be more stern. He needs to start holding guys accountable, and doing it right now, honestly, it does nothing for your team because now
maybe it'll help them start next year.
Yeah, maybe because you're going to have at least 20 to 30% of your roster is going to be different next year. So I just think he has to change his approach for going into next year. I think he has to be the coach and not the friend.
Well, I think one thing that I have a hard time imagining a scenario where a coaching change happens with the Titans independently of a change in management. Like, I can't imagine a scenario where the Titans move on from Brian Callahan and retain Ran Carthon. I think that if Brian Callahan were not to coach this team next season, it's because the Titans make another change in management, whether it's Ran Carthon or Chad Brinker, and then whomever replaces them wants their own guy. So I don't think that Brian Callahan independently, I don't think his job is at risk. But I do think one thing that plays, I think one thing that people point to is, well, wasn't Brian Callahan supposed to be, the next, what I'm trying to think of the way that people,
guru.
the next guru, like the
offensive guru,
right, the
quarterback,
Mike McDaniel
boomer
type who wears the joggers pulled up and the Versace or whatever he was wearing at that news conference, like that kind of guy. And Will Levis, people have not seen improvement from Will Levis. I know this is just a basic way of looking at it, but I'm looking at Will Levis's quarterback rating and QBR last season versus this season.
Right. I have made this point many times.
Rating last season, 84.2. Rating this season, 84. Quarterback rating last season, 34. Quarterback rating this season, 30.5. It's been kind of stable, but people see the issues that Will Levis had at the start of the season and think, wasn't Brian Callahan supposed to fix this? Wasn't this his responsibility? And I think that's part of the reason why he's come under fire.
I would make the point overreaching for both Ran Carthon and Brian Callahan. I think in retrospect, but we did say it on the day that training camp opened, even before we became DVD, before officially we became DVD. I said this team has very few, if any, outstanding players who are nucleus foundational pieces that you will sign to the next contract that are 25 and under. That is tough to fix in 1 year. It would have had to go perfect, I think, for you to even sniff a playoff spot. And like we said, there's 3 or 4 games where you can look and say, you know what? If they just won this game or this game, but that's really every year in the NFL, you could say that. But the fact is they just haven't been good enough. This roster is very devoid of talent that makes it easy for the coach. And as we pointed out before with Ran Carthon, he inherited a huge percentage of this. Now, has he gotten a lot of hits early on? No. He hasn't. He needs to hit. But I think, to be fair, I don't think a change is what they need right now. I think patience will help. At least I think it plays better around the league. If you're constantly changing everything every year, that's not a good way to fix things and be successful, I don't think.
Yeah, you can't continue to dig into your bag when a few things go wrong and try to throw everything out and let's start over again. If that's the case, you're going to be starting over again every time you don't have the season that you want. You may have a good season, then turn around and have a bad season, and all of a sudden now you're screaming and yelling, "Oh, there needs to be changes across the board." No, that's not the case. Good and great organizations find a way to battle through the tough times, whether it be with the coach at the helm or giving that coach a true opportunity, allowing that coach to build this team the way he wants to build it, seeing the vision of the coach and letting that coach have time for that vision to come to fruition. After 1 year, can't nobody say, "Oh, you gave the coach time." You didn't give a coach time to do anything if you're going to fire him after 1 year. I just believe that they owe it to themselves. They owe it to the fan base, I believe, to allow this to not keep changing when the wind blows. Stick with it. See if it works. If it doesn't work, then you move on. But that would have been what? 3 head coaches in what? 5 years, basically. It would have been 5 or 6 years, 3 head coaches in 6 years, because Vrabel was a coach for 5 years. You had Malarkey, they fired Malarkey, then they got Vrabel, him spinning. And if you fire him after 1 year, that's basically 3 coaches in 6 years.
615-737-1025. What are your thoughts on Brian Callahan's performance thus far as Titans head coach? What do you like? What don't you like? We'll get into all of that next on our phone and text lines driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com. Willie Donick, Derek Mason, Adam Vingan, 102.5, 106.3 The Game.
Zen Sports just picked the grand prize winner for the November Big Game Sweepstakes. They just picked it, so the November Game Sweepstakes is over. But don't worry, because we're bringing some more good news. Now they are running it back in the month of December with the Big Game Sweepstakes College Edition. So they've done the pros. Now they're cycling through the college edition. This time, instead of going to the big game for the pros, they are giving you a chance to go to the very first big game in the new college football tournament with the grand prize of $10,000 cash and 2 tickets to the biggest college football game of 2025. Yes, I'm talking about the one right down the street in Atlanta, and the ability to earn entries on every bet you place in December. It doesn't get much better than this, people. If you don't win, don't worry about it. If you don't win the grand prize, don't worry. You'll also have a shot to win one of 10 small prizes, which grants you $1,000 toward any college football game in 2025. So what are you waiting for? Head to zensports.com/sweepstakes for a full list of the rules and earn $100 no danger wager first bet. That's Zen Sports, where betting just got better. And remember, gambling problems, call 1-800-889-9789. Terms and conditions apply. Must be 21 years or older to bet here in Tennessee.
D. Mace, Finnegan, and Donick, 102.5, 106.3 The Game. Max Hers giving us a polite round of applause. You can catch Max Hers at this desk at 6 o'clock for Predators pregame. Derek, always with the groupies, my friend. Wherever we go, there's always one.
That's what the Predator fans after the game say to Max during the postgame
Exactly.
show. He's just recreating the atmosphere
That's
here
all
in
they
Barrel
doing.
House.
That's
Postgame.
all.
Yeah, I mean, Max gets to work at a bar, so I
I
get why he
It's awesome.
gets to pick up the fans. But Robert is on our phone line, driven by Wilson County, Hyundai.com. Robert has a question for Derek. Robert, thank you for calling. Please go ahead.
Hey guys, how y'all doing today?
Good,
Doing
thank you.
good.
All right, guys. On Coach Cal, you know, and I hate to say this, you know, if I'm grading on a scale of A to F, you know, I'd have to give him a D. You know, our damn offensive line sucks. But D. Mace, my question is, as a fan of the Titans and the Predators, they seem like they're going through the same freaking problem each team does. But my question for you, D. Mace, is, you know, you play professional ball. These guys are making $1 million a day or a year playing football and hockey.
Just
You know,
day, a
can
year,
you-
just same difference. Yeah.
Yeah, can you
Maybe Juan Soto,
as a-
$1 billion a day.
yeah, as a coach, can you motivate these players, or can you not? You know, to me, you know, if you know the coach is making $5 million and the quarterback making 30, I'd be like, dude, you don't know what you're talking about. Go away. But you know, they just look like they I don't know, they're discombobulated or something. But can you, as a coach, motivate these players, even though you know we suck? And I'll get off the phone and listen, guys. Appreciate y'all. Y'all have a Merry Christmas.
Hey, same to you. Merry Christmas. I
great.
mean, some of those
I-
players
I-
wish they were making $1 million a day.
I did like that last bit. How do you motivate these guys, even though they suck? The emphasis. Thank you for the
That's
call, Robert.
Thank
Derek,
you,
go ahead.
Robert. Listen, you know, regardless of how much money a guy makes or don't make, listen, I think all those guys have earned the money that they're making. When you take the beating that you take to go out there to play a game that you really enjoy, there's not enough compensation. So I'm always the person that have said, listen, you only worth as much as you believe you're worth, and then how much the market is going to tell you you're worth. That's it. So whether you're making $20 million per year or $30 or $40 million, listen, I don't think it's too much, because the person that is doling out the checks, they're making 20 times more than you. So I never go down that road in regards to players and money and all that stuff. But, you know, I come from a school of thought here, and I was taught this a long time ago by my brothers. Like, listen, it shouldn't take a coach to motivate you to do something that you love doing, that you enjoy doing, that you want to be the best at, that you want to be known, you know, after you're done, where you're a great player. It doesn't take a coach to motivate you. If you're looking for a coach to motivate you, you're not going to succeed in this league. You're not going to succeed at doing such things. Now, can a coach show leadership? Yes, coach can show leadership. Are there coaches that are really good at saying the right things at the right time? And you know, it infuses, you know, whatever it needs to infuse to get you going. Yeah, there are coaches like that, but you can't always look for the coach to be there to motivate you. And again, the good players to great players, or the guys that really want to win, they don't care how much the coach make. They're not looking at it from the standpoint of, I'm making more than you, so I don't have to listen to you. If you have guys like that on your team, you're not a winning team. You're just not, no matter what sport you're in. It's the guys that respect their coach and go out there and do what your coach is asking you to do, regardless of how much they make or how much you make.
We have a couple of texts on our text line about Brian Callahan, driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com. Andy says, I feel Coach Callahan needs to hire a kick-butt OC where he can head coach. Alex from Montreal says, I think he makes rookie head coaching mistakes, as was expected, but not having a good roster is making him look worse. Jared from Spring Hill says, I don't think he's good at anything. Mediocre or worse across the board. Too many penalties. Bad special teams coach who's his buddy and incurable.
You sure that's not Jared from Nashville.
I have texted back at Jared from Spring Hill and said, Jared, parentheses, Stillman from Spring Hill, which he said, I was more opinionated first. But too many mistakes on every play, getting out schemed in the second halves of every game except Miami and Houston, not growing the quarterback and regressing him, not leading on the run to get you through, not being able to figure out how to keep D-Hop and Ridley happy, too many fumbles. Sure, he can get better because it's already so bad. It's marginal growth.
I do wonder what tweaks he will make in the offseason, presuming that he stays, because of the facts of the penalties, the special teams woefulness. I mean, they are way down there. That's got to get better, and maybe there will need to be changes on that. I'm going back to the question though, D-Mace, you gave a great perspective on what the player needs to do and what the great players do, respecting the coaches. But I think the modern head coach does have big challenges, as the caller was pointing out, of motivating, because at the end of the day, and I remember this, I feel like going back to the mid-90s in the NBA is when it really started turning. There was a point in time where the players started making a lot of money, and they concluded that, you know what, I'm not going anywhere. If I don't like the coach, I don't have to show up for practice. And the coach was like, wait a minute, you can't not show up to practice. I'm the coach. I tell you. And they were like, do something about it. They'll just fire you. I have a guaranteed contract. So, like, I think coaches have had to evolve and say, you know what? The money that the players make in most cases is going to exceed my salary unless you are Phil Jackson or Bill Belichick and you have major, major success on your resume. So a new coach does have to be creative on how he gets through to the players and gets the most out of them. And Brian Callahan was selling, I'm going to communicate with you. I'm going to be on your level. We're going to talk through stuff. But it hasn't clicked, right? So I do think it's a balance, right? The players hopefully can be receptive to any style of coaching. That's what the best do. But I think there is can you sell what you want to sell to your players and have them buy it? A buy-in.
I'm not saying that what you're saying is wrong, because I think a lot of what you're saying is right, Willie. Head coaches having to change sort of their perception of how they want to run things and how they should run things. When you kind of get in that spot, it's like, man, I want to do it this way, but it's like almost like I got to do it this way, because it's like I don't want to ruffle too many feathers. But here's the one thing about players, and players, they just want to know that, one, you have their back, and that you're going to put them in the best position to succeed, and that you're going to be the same way no matter what. See, the whole Brian Callahan finally getting a bite in him, that's why I said players are looking at him like, well, whatever, man. That don't mean nothing, because you're not consistent. When you start, now you want to get a bite now that we're losing, but you ain't have a bite at the beginning of the season. And camp with Jeffrey Simmons was fighting people, you ain't have a bite then, but now all of a sudden you want to have a bite now. Man, get out of here with that stuff.
Right. Don't you think Andrew Burnett is facing some of the same
Possibly,
things?
absolutely.
That he didn't do it early, the heavy discipline. He said, I am a player's coach. I was a player myself. I understand guys go through slumps. I'm going to have faith in you guys to get it figured out. I'm not going to go fire and brimstone. And so if he were to start doing that now,
people tune out.
That's
People
a dilemma, right?
Exactly.
Maybe that's what he needs to do, but it's also like what you're saying. How are the players going to receive that? Oh, now you're going to start being the
stickler,
the fiery disciplinarian guy.
That's why you need to come in, whether it be right or wrong. You need to come in letting everybody know, everybody in earshot of your words, no, this is my team. I am the head coach. It's not like something where you do what I say and all this other stuff like authoritarian. No, but it's, I'm coming in here and I want y'all to know this is my team, and this is the way that I would love for it, because if you show them the vision and you stay with that vision, they will stay in the ship with you. But the minute you show them that vision and then you start doing things that are not a part of that vision, that's when guys are like, nah, I don't believe them.
Yeah, but when it's going bad, because the Gentry asked this, right? If you're a Nashville sports fan, you're watching both teams swimming right now. They're swimming. They need a life preserve. They're floating. They're trying to stay above water, and it's not looking good, right? So when the times are tough, how do you get stuff fixed that has to get fixed?
Again,
without changing who you are as a coach. That's a tough thing. That's
That's
probably why coaches get fired sometimes.
Exactly, because you always start off one way, and then it's this drastic change when y'all losing. Like, listen, John Harbaugh was the same the first day as he was the last day. Nick Saban definitely was the same the first day as he was when we were winning. It didn't matter with him because he wanted to set a precedent. Like, listen, in order for us to be successful, these are the things that we need to do. These are guardrails, just like with a kid. You don't start out giving a kid just the run of everything. No, you set guardrails. And when they prove to you that they can handle those guardrails, then you sort of let up a little bit. That's what the great coaches do. Some tend to stick with it a little bit longer, Brian Belichick, but that's what the good to great coaches do. They set a standard. Mike Tomlin, that's the reason why he's been able to keep his job for as long as he has, because he hadn't changed. Mike Tomlin will hold you accountable. He don't care who it is.
Well, here's the flip. Here's the flip.
Antonio Brown was a different story, and you see what happened to him. He got
here's the flip side
to
that. And you mentioned the name that I was just thinking about. You mentioned Nick Saban. You mentioned John Harbaugh. You mentioned Mike Tomlin. The key ingredient in all of that
winning
is they've been consistent winners, and even if they haven't every season won the title, they have been in the mix. They have been a playoff contender or a championship contender each of those seasons. We saw what happened with Bill Belichick as soon as the Patriots stopped winning.
But Bill didn't change who he was, though.
Right, but I guess that's true, but it does make it harder to have that mentality when your team isn't winning, right? It's like with Vrabel, right?
Yeah.
From afar, I'll speak to personal experience because I only watch Vrabel from afar. With Peter Laviolette could be a hard ass, right? And they were winning, and he can continue to be a hard ass because they're winning. When things started to slip, he maintained that attitude, but it was harder to, grin and bear it when things weren't going well because it could weigh on you.
But isn't that, to me, I like to be coached different. I didn't mind being because I was yelled and screamed, man. I tell you, my high school coach, Coach Lynch, and Fig, the offensive coordinator, they didn't care who you was. If you did something wrong, they would dog cut. It was just so I was used to stuff like that, but they would praise you when you did something good. So I was used to stuff like that. So when Nick Saban decided to come in, I was good. I didn't care how he coached. I can work and play for anybody. Just show respect, and respect will be given back to you. If you tell me to work hard, I need to work harder, I'm going to work hard. That's just the way it is. So to me, listen, Brian Callahan, I'm not sure that he sort of came in with the right approach as far as, holding players accountable. You could say all that stuff, but then when the rubber meets the road and you actually have to do it and you don't do it, that shows me more than when you tell me, what kind of coach you are and how you're going to hold the guys accountable. When you have an opportunity to do it and you don't do it, now that starts to tell me as a team, like, man, is this guy really, like, is he really that guy? Or is he one of those guys that, based upon what's going on, then, that's what type of coach he'll be. He'll either be an easygoing guy, or he'll be a hard ass. Players don't do well with coaches like that. Either you're going to be one way and stay that way, or the other. But players don't like this whole flip-flopping because they don't know which coach they're going to get based on if they win or lose a game.
615-737-1025. We'll continue this conversation next. Willie Donick, Derek Mason, Adam Vingan, 102.5, 106.3 The Game.
All right, let's talk about Lee Company, proud sponsor of Nashville Predators. If you're coming down to Smashville tonight, you'll see the Lee Company display all around the building, and they will be sponsoring in part our radio coverage. As you just heard, Max Hurst and company. Max will have our pregame show starting at 6. Pete Weber, Jay Moore on the call starting at 7 as the Flames are in town. Lee Company has you covered at your household. Remember, general maintenance, home or at work. They're just a phone call or an online appointment away at 615-567-1000 or leecompany.com. Yeah, you can just make the online appointment and take care of a problem that might have been nagging for a long time that you just have not had the time to get addressed. You don't want to address it yourself. That would be me. And like I said, Lee Company is reliable. We have used them all the time over the last several years. Ask about their home maintenance plan to keep your house running properly. It's leecompany.com, or remember the phone number, 615-567-1000. Lee Company, proud sponsor, Nashville Predators.
D. Mace, Vingan, and Donick, 102.5, 106.3. The Game. Willie Donick, Derek Mason, Adam Vingan here with you. Mitch Light will join us in the next segment to talk college football. Usually joins us on Wednesdays. We're doing some maneuvering here. We're flexible on this program.
Absolutely.
So we will talk to Mitch Light coming up in the next segment. But I want to see. I always hate when this happens. I get the great text, right? I'm like, oh, I can't wait to read this, and then I can't find it because it gets buried
It happens
underneath other texts. But the point of the text, and I will find it. So if you sent it, I apologize. I will give you your credit. Is this idea that if the Titans fire Brian Callahan, won't that send the wrong message to other candidates? Will it repel? That's the word I'm looking for. Will it repel other coaching candidates from wanting to come to Nashville? Paul Gaharski at his website had a column off of Brian Callahan's news conference yesterday. And this was a key graph that I want to share. Paul wrote, quote, replace Callahan and the next guy inherits a job where Vrabel was fired for doing very well when he had a decent roster and suffering when it dried up, and where Callahan will have had only one season. Guys will want the job, sure, it's one of only 32, but not the best guys who will be wary of Strunk and job security, and that guy would have the same issue hiring a staff. The Titans' best course is to let Callahan grow, to remind themselves and him of the reasons they hired him, for him to conduct a thorough autopsy on the season. So we had a texter bring that up. Paul Gaharski wrote that. This idea that if the Titans were to make another coaching change, would the top candidates be wary of wanting to come here, knowing that their tenure may end as soon as it starts?
Well, that's what I was saying. Basically, if you really are considering drastic changes or changing the coach after 1 year,
it was Andy, by the way, Andy's text message. So thank you, Andy.
Yeah,
I found the text.
I buy that. It's not going to look good, especially when you consider what was he given. The misconception of, well, they spent all this money, it overlooks the fact that they did not have a good roster and foundational pieces that put them in a position to win. And they are moving on from an era where they were successful, but they were making more short-term decisions going for it, the Julio Jones trade, all of that with a veteran team, which they should have done. But they were going to pay the piper somewhere here. And I think this is what's happened. I think from afar, I don't think anybody's sitting there going, well, I can't believe that the Titans are struggling. I don't think that's it. Now, I think in hockey, I think everybody is sitting there going, what is going on with the Predators? They should be way better. That's a different story. But from afar with the Titans, I don't think anybody's super surprised that they have struggled this year. So I agree that the perception around the league, if they pull the trigger after one season, is, man, that was a quick hook. That's a drastic knee-jerk wild card type of decision from the top.
Yeah, if they do, which I don't, and I know my my opinion don't mean nothing when it comes to that organization and what they're thinking. But if I'm the Lions, not the Lions, but the Titans. I was about to say something about the Lions. That's why I said the Lions. But if I'm the Titans, I'm really sitting down after the season, and I'm not making a decision to change my head coach nor my offensive coordinator. I am just looking at, where are we in the process? What does it look like after a year? How far along are we in the process? And if we are behind, what is it going to take us to get back up to speed in this process? What do you need, Brian Callahan, for us to do that? What do you need, Rand Carthon, for us to get back to up to speed with the process? Because Brian Callahan talked about, the process of sticking to it, and at the beginning of the year, and this is what his vision of how this team should be, moving forward. So how far along are we in your vision? If we're not far along, how far are we back, and what do I need to do as the owner to help you and Rand get back up to speed in this progress or process? That's my first question, because if you go and fire Brian Callahan, you got to fire Rand Carthon too. I believe that's just me. I'm not advocating for either one of them to be fired. But what I'm saying is, if you are thinking about firing your head coach, you might as well fire your GM with him as well and just start over. But you got to understand, the next hottest guy out there, Ben Johnson, he's already said what his criteria were. And it doesn't seem like the Titans match his criteria. So if you're looking for the best coach out there, Ben Johnson will be at the top of the list of everybody's head coaching list. He's already said what his standards were, management of the team, how the team looked. Are y'all truly willing to do what I need you to do to make a program or an organization a better program or an organization? If you're not willing to do that, I'm not talking to you. If you have that inconsistency or that you don't have any stability, I'm not talking to you. So you're taking one guy and the best guy off the board already, if indeed you are looking to move from Brian Callahan. So you need to decide, first and foremost, where are we in this process of yours, Brian Callahan and Rand Carthon? And then what can I do to help facilitate us getting back there if we're not there?
Right. And think about what the Titans would have to sell.
Yeah.
Imagine the Titans make a coaching change or a management change in conjunction with the coaching change, because I think they would go hand in hand. What are the Titans selling, right? Last year, they could tell we've got a good young quarterback who's shown some promise. Now we have a full year of tape on Will Levis. Has he shown enough promise? I'm not sure you can sell that.
He's at the 20 start
Right.
mark now.
You can't sell that the same way you could sell it a year ago.
Exactly.
You certainly can't sell stability because we're hiring another coach
Nope.
and we're making more management changes. If that were to happen, how many people would Amy Adams Strunk be paying who don't work for her anymore? Mike Vrabel. Well, does Mike Vrabel still get paid because he's working with the Browns? I don't know how this works.
I think he may not. The Browns may not be paying him.
Right. So, like, Willie, correct me if I'm wrong
doing
here.
it as a consultant.
In the NHL, coaches who get fired with time on their contract get paid by that team until they take another job.
Yeah.
So, like Peter Laviolette, when he was fired by the Predators, was going to be paid by the Predators until he was hired by the Capitals. Then I think the Predators were off the hook.
I think the offset is, okay, say if you're making $7 million and they choose to pay you $4 million, kind of like a player, I would assume is that way, and they choose to pay you $4 million. Well, still has to pay you the $3 million.
Right.
Your other team still has to pay the remaining of that.
Either way, she'd be paying a lot of people in some form to not work for her. Right. So you're not selling stability. You're not selling a promising young quarterback because Will Levis is already in his mid-20s and we have a lot more tape on him. You could sell, hey, in a couple of years, that new stadium's going to look pretty good, but it might be 70% Vikings fans like it was a few weeks ago when they came to town.
Right. You've got a couple of tough years to bridge here before you can even reset with the new stadium. And I see where you're going. And I think as you say that, where my mind goes is they were lauded last year for they decided to get out of Mike Vrabel quick so that they could start the process early. And they did land a guy that, by all accounts, was one of the coveted up-and-coming prospects. And I think people around the league were like, hey, you got one of the guys that was on a high list of candidates, right? And it was, I don't know if he was their first choice, but if he wasn't, he was. They made it sound like that's the guy they wanted. So they got who they wanted. It's not like they were, we missed on 5 or 6 guys and we had to go with this guy. So, man, you know what I mean? Like they got who they wanted because they got into the game early. They pat themselves on the back saying, we got in early. We got our.
1025. Coming up next, Mitch Light, college football editor of The Athletic, will join us on Tuesday instead of the normal Wednesday. We, of course, have a lot to discuss about the college football playoff. Maybe we'll get into some Birmingham Bowl conversation, Vanderbilt and Georgia Tech. Who knows?
Let's go.
615-737-1025. Willie Donick, Derek Mason, Adam Vingan, 1025-1063. The Game. Teammates, Vingan and Donick, 102.5, 106.3 The Game, broadcasting from the Busy Bee Plumbing, Heating, and Air Conditioning Game Nashville studios, home of the $99 yearly Beehive membership where the buzz is always about great service. Willie Donick, Derek Mason, and Adam Vingan here with you live from Bridgestone Arena. Predators, Flames tonight at 7, pregame at 6 right here on 102.5, 106.3 The Game. But joining us on our phone line, driven by Wilson County Hyundai.com, college football editor of The Athletic, Mitch Light, kind enough to join us on a Tuesday. Mitch, we finally have the college football playoff bracket. We talked about it a little bit yesterday. When you scan the field, which team, in your opinion, got the best draw, the best path to a potential championship game appearance, and which team might have gotten shafted a little bit in their draw on their way to the title?
Well, the way things shake out now with the injury situation at Georgia, I would say Penn State has especially for a team that did not receive a bye. I mean, Oregon would be a good answer because they're the number 1 seed and they have a bye, but that's the boring answer. So I'll say Penn State have to beat SMU at home, Boise State in a neutral field, and then potentially Georgia with its backup quarterback or Notre Dame or Indiana. So I would say Penn State, especially the way they played in the Big Ten championship game. Obviously, they lost the game. They gave up a lot of points, but they showed some toughness, came back, and made a lot of plays when it looked like the game was going to get away from them. So I would think they would feel pretty good about their draw. Conversely, I would say Tennessee probably not in love with the way things worked out, have to go Ohio State. I know it's not a vintage Ohio State team, but still traveling up to Columbus and then get the number 1 seed after that. And then after that, it might be Texas, who, again, we've seen them struggle, but one of the most talented teams in the country.
So Alabama athletic director Greg Byrne took to social media the other day after Alabama was left out of the field. And I understand he's biased, to put it lightly. And yeah. I thought he said something interesting. He wrote, quote, "We have said that we would need to see how strength of schedule would be evaluated by the CFP. With this outcome, we will need to assess how many P4 non-conference games make sense in the future to put us in the best position to participate in the CFP. That is not good for college football." Does Greg Byrne have a point, or is this just sour grapes?
No, I think no. And this is not an original thought. I mean, they did not get in because they lost to 2 6-6 teams in the SEC. Had they lost at Wisconsin and had a better SEC record, then I still think it's sour grapes, but the point is more valid. They played a bad Wisconsin team that went 5-7. They played a South Florida team that just had to scrape to get to bowl eligibility. They beat Western Kentucky 63-0, and they beat Mercer. So I really do not understand all of the belly aching. I don't think I've used that term in a long time. Belly aching from SEC fans, SEC country, about strength of schedule and all that stuff. When again, it was Alabama losing to 2 6-6 teams.
But Mitch, wouldn't we say that is counteractive to the way the basketball tournament committee makes their selections, where strength of schedule is everything? They don't worry about the 1-loss record of a 17-12. But it should be the same principle to some degree, shouldn't it? Yeah, it should. Because I could argue that at Oklahoma and this year's Vanderbilt team, yeah, they're 6-6, but that's in the SEC, and the strength of the SEC is the depth of the league. So that's not just any 6-6 team. I agree. But as I was about to say, I think it was also a unique set of circuits. Look, I'll go back to my original thought. It's a different sport. I completely agree with you. There's fewer games of importance in basketball. There's far more data points in college football. There's fewer. I don't know if I'm making my point or contradicting my point, but there is differences in the two sports. And I will say I think it was a unique set of circumstances where in future years, if it's a 3-loss Alabama team with a similar resume versus a 2-loss ACC team, that the SEC team would get it. I think really, and I'm not in that room, and as I always say, there's 13 people with 13 opinions. But I think what it came down to is SMU losing in the championship game and the committee not wanting to penalize them for a good showing. I think 24-7 in the first, late in the second quarter, whatever it was, if SMU got run off the field, Alabama would be in. But I think personally it came down to them losing close in the championship game and setting a precedent about penalizing
a team for reaching its championship game and playing a 13th game.
We talk with Mitch Light of The Athletic discussing the college football playoffs. Now, Mitch, of these first round games, which one would you consider would be an upset? I know we can look at the Texas and Clemson, but Clemson started to play a lot better after their loss to Georgia. So you could possibly look at that one. But out of the 4 games that would be played, which one do you believe would be the biggest upset?
I'm going to contradict what I said earlier about Penn State having a terrible draw and pick SMU. I had to make picks. When you're doing your brackets in the NCAA, you don't want to pick all favorites. Well, there's 32 first-round games. In this, there's only 4.
You always got to pick the 12 over 5. There's got to be a 12 over 5.
I did not take the 12 over 5. I took SMU over Penn State, and I didn't just do it just to pick an upset. I really think it can happen. They have a very good offense. Kevin Jennings is a really good quarterback. Penn State's defense, I know Oregon's probably better than SMU, but Penn State just got lit up by Oregon. It was probably 2 or 3 months ago, but I remember watching the Bowling Green Penn State game. Bowling Green gave Penn State's defense fits in the first half. I really think they'll be able to move the ball. And while home games are great in the playoff, I think we might see if a favorite, and it could be working Ohio State's favor and Tennessee's favor. I think if a favorite, a home team is struggling early, you get that nervous energy in the building, and Penn State fans like, it's, we're losing to SMU. What's going on here? And I think you can, James Franklin, obviously well documented his record in big games and all that stuff. So I think being the road team might play to SMU's advantage. I wouldn't be surprised if they won that game.
Now, which game is the most intriguing to you, that first round, those first round matchups? I look at the Indiana and Notre Dame game. That's an intriguing game to me. I know many people look at it and say Indiana didn't play anyone. When they did, they end up losing, and I understand it. But that game, if you watched it, it was probably a little bit tighter than what the score indicated. There were some special teams things that happened and whatnot, but I still believe Indiana is a damn good team. But people just automatically think that, they're going to lose to Notre Dame.
Yeah, I think there's two. The Ohio State Tennessee game, I think, for obvious reasons, just 2 great programs. But I will go back to that game you just referenced. I'm interested to see Indiana in its kind of second opportunity in a big game. Like they failed is a strong word, but they failed in their first opportunity against Ohio State. Notre Dame had a great run after the Northern Illinois game. Statistically, I think they lead the nation in total offense and total defense, maybe, or scoring offense and scoring defense, something like that since that game. But the schedule hasn't been great. And remember the USC with its backup quarterback, I know he beat out Miller Moss, but they moved the ball. They had some success moving the ball against Notre Dame. So, and Indiana's offense is very good. So I pick Notre Dame here, but would not be surprised at all if Indiana really made them sweat. And I just think it's cool, too. You got 2 teams from the state of Indiana playing.
Exactly. What do you think of Indiana's quarterback?
I like him. I mean, his brother, Nathan Rourke was a really good quarterback at Ohio before him. And, he's had a good career. He got hurt 2 years ago. Took a while to come back. But, that was a very good job of evaluating in the portal and picking a guy who they thought would be good for his system. I think when healthy, he's been very good this year.
Mitch Light is with us from The Athletic. We're talking college football and the bracket. So, Mitch, philosophically, I understand why they have the bracket the way it is. They had to start somewhere with the 12 teams. But after what you see now, and you just were talking about some of the things you can poke holes in, Boise State getting a bye, Penn State looking like they might have an easier pathway to the semifinal than Oregon, arguably. Do you think that they will next year reconsider the reward for winning the conference, especially in these huge conferences where not everybody plays even, basically play half the teams in these leagues? So what does it really mean to win the conference? The suggestion was made by the panel of just seeding them 1 through 12 and not seeding them by league champion. What do you think? Do you think they will make that decision at some point?
Yeah, I do. I think I think it was in theory, a good idea what they did, but this idea was crafted when there was 5 power leagues before the demise of the Pac-12. So it wasn't such a big 2 and other 2 type thing. So I don't think this scenario was really they could envision this scenario where you have, and no knock to Arizona State and Boise State, but two weaker teams than some other of the at-large teams. So I think that's a reason we're seeing this. But I totally agree. I think winning your league and getting in is reward enough, but that they should honor the best, just go 1 through 12 and see that way. I think it will eventually go that way. I should know this. I think they can change the form of the teams after 2 years. I don't know if they're locked into this format for next year. Again, I should know that. They might be, but if not, I think they will change it.
This is the point that Nick Saban made repeatedly.
Repeatedly, yes.
Yes. Well, and this was one detail that I thought was a very good point. If you are going to put a bracket up every week in the weeks leading up to the actual bracket, just like Joe Lunardi does, he does every day, basically.
He does bracketology during the offseason.
And this, look, I've watched him do it. I do my own research for that, etc. As everybody knows that's listened to me for a long time. But this is why I don't put the brackets up. I don't make a bracket when I'm looking at who's going to be in, because if you are going to pencil in a league champion, then that takes up a spot. But everybody knows that when you put that bracket up, it's not set in stone because that team has to win the league. So Nick Saban's point that SMU was ranked higher than they should have been because you had to put a team down. You put the leader of the SEC in the bracket when they had to obviously win the game to get in. So SMU was like, well, you ranked us 8th. So you're penalizing us if we lose this championship game. But Nick Saban was like, they really weren't the 8th ranked team going in, but they were holding a spot on that board because they were leading the conference. I would suggest to the committee, if it were me, and they're not going to listen to me, they don't have my phone number or anything. Mitch, maybe you could give it to them if anybody wants.
Yes, I will.
My suggestion would be don't put a bracket up. Just rank the teams 1 through 12 in the league in the weeks leading up to the actual bracket. There's no need to put a bracket up there, and that might have changed their thinking on SMU.
Okay, I think I can poke holes in both those. I mean, if you put the rankings up, everyone knows how it works, so they can just make their own bracket. Like, that's what we would do with the Athletic. We run every week. If you rank the 12 teams, I know that if you've got SMU the highest, you're projecting them to win. And I think if I understood your point and Saban's point correctly, that's not really what they did. They had SMU ranked 7 or wherever because they thought they were the 7th best team. They had Arizona State and Iowa State ranked like 15 and 16 heading into championship weekend. They didn't rank them artificially high to get them in the bracket. They didn't need to. The champion of that league gets into the bracket. So heading into conference championship week, they had Arizona State 15 and Iowa State 16 or vice versa. And then Arizona State looked really good and they moved them up to 12. They didn't move them up to 12 to get them in the bracket. They moved them up to 12 because they're the 12th best team. They would be in the bracket if they were ranked 14th still. So if I'm, again, interpreting it correctly, I think that has nothing to do with it.
Well, I guess then I will pin you down on why did the committee think that SMU was ranked deserving of the 8th ranking when they had not beaten a top 25 team?
Same philosophy with Indiana. They just thought, I mean, I'm not being a wise, they just thought they were the 7th best team. I'm not saying I agree with it, but it's very difficult to rank those teams this year because of those unbalanced schedules that you mentioned. The SMU did not play Clemson. They did not play Miami. They did not play some of the top teams in the league there. So,
did not play Syracuse.
Syracuse. I'm not saying it was right or wrong, but they had them ranked 7th because that's where they came up with their rankings. Like in the whole, we even wrote about this. It's never going to happen. And say, they're not going to stop doing the weekly show because it makes a lot of money and people like go crazy talking about the rankings. I've been on your show for last 5 weeks. All we do is talk about the rankings. So I don't think they contrived anything with SMU because, again, if they were contriving things, they would have had the projected Big 12 winner in the top 12, which they did not do until after the championship weekend.
Okay, so in general, I believe that Nick Saban has some really good points, and he will be penalized, I think, in how those points go over because of where he sits with Alabama. And people are just going to say, well, he's giving Alabama's case. But I think he has some very good points, especially when we look at the perspective of how the basketball tournament is selected, that I do think that committee does need to sort of rethink how they do their process.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I think it boiled down to SMU. If they were 11 and if they had 2 losses, it did not reach the championship game. Now that's a different thing because they would be 3rd in their league. So again, that's a different point. I think it just boiled down to them having a fine showing and not wanting to be penalized for that. And I get the Alabama. I'm with you. I mean, I think the SEC is clearly the best league. It's the deepest league. And I know this argument doesn't really. A lot of people don't want to hear it. But don't lose to Oklahoma 24-3 when you know you're playing for your playoff life. And then Oklahoma, it's not like they were playing great late season. Last game of the year, I forgot where'd they go. They went down to. They got beat bad the last game of the year. I forgot who they played. But so it's not like you lost to a red hot Oklahoma team.
Yeah.
And you know what's at stake. Don't lose a 3rd game. I mean, it's easy for me to say that, but that's kind of So I have obviously you can tell I have no problem with the committee's decision to put SMU in over Alabama.
The getting beat bad by Oklahoma, that was a factor.
Yeah.
If it was a 27 freaky double overtime game, that might have been a little bit different. So
right, you can't look at that. You can't look at that Alabama-Oklahoma game late in the year and say, "Wow, this team." I don't care. This team deserves to be in. I don't care what else has happened the rest of the year. If you're looking for a reason to leave them out of the field, you can point to that game.
All right, real quick, thoughts on the Georgia Tech Vanderbilt matchup? What can be accomplished for Vanderbilt? A lot of people, you look at this, they'd be 6-7. That happened a couple times under Derek Mason.
Yeah,
it looks better when it says 7-6 and not 6-7. Even though getting to a bowl game was a huge accomplishment, but we also know that in today's bowl games, there's all kinds of X factors with people opting out, going into the portal, etc.
Yeah, I think it's very big for the reasons you stated. There's a huge difference between 7-6 and 6-7. You don't want to lose these in the season with 4 straight losses. I mean, big picture, should it take away from the things they accomplished? No. But again, there's a huge difference. I heard Clark Lee in an interview said we want to put a bowl trophy there. So I think you'll get a very motivated team, Vanderbilt team, and it's a fun game. I mean, both teams have fun offenses. Haynes King, assuming he plays, I think there's been some portal rumors with him, but I'm not buying it. I mean, maybe I'll look at Twitter right after this and he's in the portal. I don't know. But, 2 really fun quarterbacks, and Georgia Tech has been good all year. The one thing that Vanderbilt has going for them, Georgia Tech plays really well against ranked opponents. I mean, look at Brent Key's record against ranked opponents versus unranked opponents. It's like almost better versus ranked opponents. So I'm half kidding there. But, really fun matchup. Both schools about 2.5, 3 hours away from Birmingham. So it should be a fun game.
Quickly, before we get you out of here, Mitch, because of the season Vandy had, did you see any bump with their recruiting?
Not really, because in today's climate, or it's been this way for probably about 5-6 years, most schools have all their commitments in June. That's when the official visits are. Most kid commitments are before the season started. I said this, I think we might have talked a couple weeks ago. Like Indiana had 23 commitments before they played their first game this year. So they weren't really, it's usually the next year. You capitalize after showing the product on the field with the next year's class. Where it should help for them is in the portal. There's proof of concept. You can't just sell them on a vision. You can say, hey, look, we won 3 SEC games. We beat Alabama. So I'd expect their portal class to be better, while the recruiting class was just similar to what it's been in recent years.
Mitch Light, college football editor from The Athletic, joining us on D-Mace, Vingan, and Donick. Mitch, well,
hey, one more thing, guys. Sorry. Willie, if you want to take this offline and keep arguing, you know where to find me. Just give me a call after.
Yes. I might just do that.
I'm here. Bring it on.
Are you familiar, Mitch, with the Rocks for Jocks class that Willie allegedly
Yeah,
exactly.
taught in school?
Well, what was
Not
it?
at Vanderbilt. I've never heard of such a thing. maybe that's why I was never in the same class with Willie.
Mitch challenged himself a little more academically, apparently, than I did.
Hey, look where I am. Look where you are. So, okay.
Mitch, always
All right,
a
guys.
pleasure.
Take care.
Talk next
All
week.
right,
Mitch Light joining us from The Athletic. No Rocks for Jocks for Mitch. He didn't get
Perhaps he took the physics for poets
Yeah,
class out there
maybe.
for English majors.
Maybe
that
he
just
did.
needed to get the science credit.
I'd never heard of that class. Did they? Okay, this may be a dumb question, but I've never heard of that class in my life. But I heard a class like, all right, if you want an easy class, just take this class.
Oh yeah, everybody, they're all
Yeah.
they get the nicknames for it.
We never had the nickname.
Yeah.
I mean, I was not a
Rocks for
collegiate
Jocks.
athlete like the two of you, so I don't know.
The classic though is when you think it sounds like an easy class, And then you get in there like, whoa, I had one person at Vanderbilt tell me, I signed up for astrology. And they were thinking astronomy, like, hey, we're going to go out, we're going to look at the stars, we're going to check out, we're going to learn the constellations and where everything is, and he got in there. It was all physics and math. He was like, wait a minute, where's the planetarium? Where's the field trip? He was out of there. He was out of there after 2 weeks. He goes, I'm dropping this class, man.
I'm surprised he lasted 2 weeks.
615-737-1025. Coming up next, we're going to switch gears to the Predators. I had an opportunity. I love when I'm able to come here because I have an opportunity to talk to the players and Andrew Brunette before our show. I asked Andrew Brunette a question that I've been wanting to ask him for quite some time. We'll play that coming up next. Willie Duddick, Derek Mason, Adam Vinkin, 102.5, 106.3. The Game.
Hey, this is D. Mason, and you heard me tell you about Dr. Lodge and his staff over at Cool Springs MD. If you set out to lose weight, chances are it's not your first time setting a resolution to shed some extra pounds only to come up short or disappointed. But I got something for you. At Cool Springs MD, Dr. Lodge and his team understands the frustration of this cycle, and that is why they offer a different approach to weight loss. Their comprehensive weight loss program is led by Dr. Jeffrey Lodge and addresses the root cause of weight gain with tailored nutrition, exercise, blood test supplements, and more. They will customize a program specific to you and no one else. So connect with Dr. Lodge at CoolSpringsMD.com today to schedule your appointment for your personalized weight loss plan. That's Cool Springs MD, where your weight loss journey becomes a success story.
Yeah!
D-Mace, Vingan, and Donick, 102.5, 106.3 The Game. Willie Donick, Derek Mason, Adam Vingan, live from Bridgestone Arena. The Predators make a quick pit stop at home to host the Flames tonight. Pre-game starts at 6 right here on 102.5, 106.3 The Game. Barry Trotz will join Jared Stillman for his weekly conversation at 5 o'clock, so be sure to tune in for that. So one thing I like about coming to the rink on home game days is I have an opportunity to be around the team, which I don't have as much time to do because our show is off and on when they're practicing. So it gives me an opportunity to ask questions of players and of Andrew Brunette. So one thing that I have talked about a lot when it comes to this team, one thing that we talked about Brian Callahan earlier and, you know, the shift in tone and all of those things. But one thing that I've talked a lot about with Brunette, something that I disagree with him on, is it feels like from afar, I emphasize that, from afar, it feels like he is not holding his top players accountable for their poor performances. So today they had a meeting. They did not skate because they practiced yesterday. Alex Daugherty of the Tennessean started off the news conference asking about the idea of, you know, have you thought about it scratching any of your top players as they've been struggling? I followed up. Here is what I asked Andrew Brunette, and here was his response.
In that situation, I understand that top players tend to have longer leashes than depth players, but do you worry about any sense of inequality? For example, I remember Michael McCarron had a turnover in a game against Edmonton back in October. That led to a goal by Leon Draisaitl, and if I'm not mistaken, he was scratched for a game or a couple games after that. Jonathan Marchessault has had multiple turnovers that I can recall, including in Montreal, that led to a shorthanded goal against, but yet he hasn't seen any reduction in his playing time. Do you worry about the inequality there?
I think you always worry. You know, I think players see it. Players see through a lot of different things. You know, with Marchie, I think you're trying to, you know, be patient with him. You're trying to make him feel comfortable. You're trying to find solutions for him because we're going to need him. You know, with Big Mac, yeah, I'm sure he looks at that saying, well, what happened to me? But Big Mac's game, I think he was -10 at the time too. And, you know, unfortunately, like I said, I could scratch every guy in the team. And is there going to come a time? There might. But I think with saying that, I think everybody wants to be held accountable. Everybody wants that, but they don't like it when they're held accountable. And, you know, that's where it gets tricky. And when you got a whole team that's probably not playing up to their capabilities or up to the expectations, it's easy to have that excuse. Well, how come he's not getting it? And my point to them is, how about you play better?
That was Andrew Brunette to me earlier this morning. I don't know if either of you had heard that before we played it. What were your thoughts on his response?
Oh, wow. I mean, he was honest and upfront about it. But he was also right when he said, listen, yeah, I understand it can, you know, cause a divide. That's where, you know, you have to be fair and you have to be, you got to know your locker room, but you also got to be fair to the locker room. Like, okay, if this guy messed up and it's been something repeatedly over and over again, then yes, I have to do something to sort of get his attention. But you can't then look at someone else and say after his, you know, 3, 4, 5 mistakes, say, oh, no, we're just still trying to work him in. Well, what about the guy that did make a mistake? Isn't he trying to find himself now with the new guys as well? So you're going to give the new guys a pass, but not the guys that were here. And it might be harder for them to adjust to the new guys than the new guys to adjust to them. So if you're going to get past to one, maybe you should get past to the other. Or if you're going to take some ice time, again, I never said scratch a guy, but if you're going to take away ice time for one, you need to take away ice time for the other, so that, listen, everybody is held accountable for their play. Yes, you told the other guy, hey, listen, worry about yourself, play better, but human nature kicks in. Like, okay, You are right, coach. I do need to play better. But if this guy is steady doing the same things that he has been doing all season, when do you tell him he needs to play better?
This is, I think, a couple of dilemmas that I'm seeing with that. Number one, as we talked about with the Titans, Andrew Burnett, I think, has presented himself from day one as a player's coach. He said, I remember the first interview I did with him when he got the job. He said, I think I can relate to players because I've been a player that's been on top lines. I've been a player who's been the 13th forward, who is ticked off that he's not in the lineup. And I've been the third, fourth line grinder. I've been on good teams. I've been on terrible teams. So he can relate to every situation a team has been in. But I think he has tried to say, I'm not going to be Mr. Fire Brimstone. You know, they call it the bag skate, right? When you don't play well, you're going to practice extra and we're going to do sprints. You know, that's just never how he's been. And he's trying to be true to himself. So he hasn't started down the path of yanking people's playing time, especially veteran players who he knows he's got to have. So to change would be to go against a little bit of his philosophy, number one. Number two, if he did want to do it, I think the dilemma is nobody's playing well. So who are you elevating? You're elevating somebody else who has struggled, right? So if you're going to, let's take the example you said. If you're going to bench Marchessault, who do you elevate? You're elevating Tommy Novak or Luke Evangelista. Those guys have struggled. So that's the tough thing. And so I think it's got to be really tough for Burnett because he's probably looking at the veteran guys, especially Marchessault, Stamkos. Look, I have backed you guys. I could bench you. Maybe I should have benched you. But you got to give me something back here. Reward me. Like, where's your fight for me? I'm taking all this heat for not benching you guys, but you guys, I've shown patience with you. Reward me for my patience somewhere in here. And that's where a little bit that last part is. How about playing better? Because I think in this town, this is just how I observe Nashville as a sport. The fans, the media tend to gravitate towards the coach disproportionately to the accountability for the player. Jonathan Marchessault, Steven Stamkos, you could go down the road. Nobody's having a good year. But I don't hear people calling in going, what's wrong with Marchessault? It's all, hey, should they fire Andrew Burnett?
Yeah.
That's 90% of it. Or they pick on a guy like Michael McCarron or Cole Smith. And to me, that's not where the team is winning and losing. When your top guys are having lousy seasons, that is where you're going to sink or swim. It's not all on the coach to go out and make the plays. Well, you say, hey, who am I playing with? I'm not playing with this guy or that guy. That's what Marchessault was saying.
And we'll talk about those comments.
But you're the guy that scored 40 goals. You're supposed to be driving the other guys to someday. I could see if he was doing okay, but he's not pulling his weight. I want to hear more accountability from the star guys saying, I got to do better.
Well, it goes to, listen, when you tell one guy you need to be playing better, the minute you say that, you turn guys off. They may agree with you, and they may think in their head, yeah, he's right. But why isn't he telling that top guy he needs to play better? He's taking away my ice time of scratching me, and then tell me, well, if I do bring up, well, it's not the same treatment across the board. And you tell me, well, you just play better. Well, you've lost them now. You've completely lost them. Where in actuality, you should be telling a top line guy, hey, you need to be playing better because we brought you here because we felt you could change our fortunes, and you're not doing it. I gave you grace period. That grace period is over. Now I need to start holding y'all feet to the fire. And he didn't rule it out that he wouldn't, but when you don't do those things early on, what do people tend to do? They go to the head coach. Well, this is your deal. You running it. And the guys are not playing well, and they don't seem like you holding anybody accountable. So maybe we should just ask if your job should be questioned because you're not doing the things necessary to hold those guys, especially your top guys that are not playing well. you're not holding those guys accountable.
Yeah, and Willie, I can't speak to how other markets cover their teams just because this is the market that I've been in for almost 10 years. And I can't recall exactly how it was when I was in Washington. But it is, I mean, the coach is always the scapegoat, the easiest scapegoat, because it's the easiest change to make, right?
Mm-hmm.
You're not firing Jonathan Marchessault. He signed a 5-year contract. Contracts in the NHL are guaranteed. You can't cut a guy like you can in the NFL with time on his contract. I mean, you could buy him out, but you know, that's a little bit more complicated. You know, I see it as, you know, when we were talking about this last week with specifically Stamkos and Marchessault, we know that they're not bad players. We have plenty of evidence to suggest that they're not bad players. Steven Stamkos, when he hangs up his skates one day, you might as well just put his placard in the in the Hockey Hall of Fame, not the NHL Hall of Fame. You should put his placard in the Hockey Hall of Fame. Marchessault has won the Conn Smythe Trophy as playoff MVP. That is an illustrious award. His name is on the Stanley Cup, as is Steven Stamkos, a couple of times. I think where it falls with Brunette in this conversation is when we see those players, and that's the same, it's the sort of the thing we talked about last week with how all of these players are having down seasons. I think it would be easier to place the blame on the players if one or two players out of the larger group were having issues. It's across the board. Forsberg isn't having his normal type season. Before Ryan O'Reilly was injured, he wasn't having a season as compared to last season. Gus Nyquist, Stamkos, Marchessault,
Right.
Brady.
It's you don't have to name everybody. It's
Right.
everybody
Right.
on the team.
And that to me speaks more to a putting more emphasis on the coach than the player when it's across the board that these things are happening versus
But
an isolated
I guess I would ask
incident.
you why. Because if Andrew Brunette was in his first year as the coach, and then I could maybe say, well, okay, it's the new coach. But last year, it was the complete opposite. With most of these players, they thrived in this system, which is the way he wants to play. And so I would ask, why is it his fault if it's the same way he's been teaching it
It's
from
not
last year?
all.
And
To be clear, it's not all his
Right.
fault. I'm just
Right.
saying that
I think that's where I'm not saying he's not to blame at all.
Right.
I'm not absolving him. I just think it should be spread around a little bit more, including Barry Trotz. And I think he said this to Jared last week. He goes, you know, I made the call to bring in established, I think he called them legacy players.
Yes.
Right. The serial winners that he thought would be able to adapt. It's clear that they have not adapted to the system, that the system has had to be tweaked.
and I will give Brunette credit for doing that.
He's
by the
tried,
way.
and he hasn't really been given much of a choice. But I do think deep down, Andrew Brunette has a vision of how he wants his teams to play. And I'm not sure the guys that were brought in to add to what was a good formula last year have been able or willing to play that kind of system. And that's a key question: is are they not able to play, or they just don't like playing that way?
It's twofold quickly. It's okay. You bring these guys in, and the guys that were there in the previous year, they found out a way. They found out how to play within the system. And now you add these new guys, and things are not going the way that you expected them to go. And then all of a sudden, now you tweak the system a little bit more. Now you might have tweaked it out of helping the guys that were already trenched into that system that you were teaching, and they know sort of the ins and outs of it, and they feel comfortable in how you're calling it and what they're doing. And then all of a sudden you bring in these 3 or 4 new guys, and you keep it that way for a minute, but then you find out how well they're not meshing in this system well, so let me change it a little bit more. Well, you might have hurt the majority to try to appease, 3 or 4 guys. Now, hey, listen, you paid those 3 or 4 guys a lot of money, and you may have to do it, but you may have to understand that because I changed it some, now instead of helping, now what I did to help a few has hurt many.
615-737-1025. Jonathan Marchessault, speaking of Marchessault, had some interesting comments last week. We will discuss those next. Willie Donick, Derek Mason, Adam Vingan, 1025, 1063. The Game. D. Mace, Vingan, and Donick, 102.5, 106.3 of the game. Willie Donick, Derek Mason, Adam Vingan here with you. Stillman and Company coming up at 2 o'clock. Barry Trotz joins Jared at 5 o'clock. Speaking of Barry Trotz, David is on our phone line, driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com with a Predators comment. David, thank you for calling. Please go ahead.
How you doing, Derek? Look,
Hey.
I just don't think everybody's getting the point. Rand Carthon came in here. He didn't address the offensive line the way he should have at all. Why are you worrying about somebody catching the ball if you can't block the guy who's throwing it? Come on. And then Barry Trotz was here for 16 years. He never really did that much for us. Got us in the playoffs and went home. I mean, then you bring him back as a GM. How's that working out? You threw away a lot of good players that are playing on top-notch teams, on other teams, on their top lines, and we're going down the drain. I don't have any faith in Barry Trotz. I'm glad some people do, but it won't be me. And Rand Carthon, his draft picks are terrible for the last 2 years, not helping.
Thank you for the
That's
call,
my
David.
opinion.
So let's talk about the Barry Trotz.
Yes.
So let's talk about the major moves that Barry Trotz has made since he became GM. So I'm not going to include his role in the sell-off with Matthias Ekholm, Nino Niederreiter, and Mikhail Granlund and Tanner Janelle. I would say his first official act was trading Ryan Johansson. That's worked out pretty well, right? Now, Matt Duchene has been a high-scoring player for the Dallas Stars, but that was less about the production and more about the influence in the dressing room.
And the role that he was playing.
Yes.
As opposed to the role he's playing on Dallas, where he is more a depth skill guy
versus being the man.
Making $3 million
Right.
as opposed to being the man
And
counted
making
on
$8
for everything,
million.
making $8 million.
Right.
So
they-
I don't think anybody would want to do over on that. Very, very few, I think.
Right. Ryan O'Reilly and Gus Nyquist were the two highest scoring players in the NHL last season who joined new teams. They were great last season, O'Reilly and Nyquist. They far exceeded expectations from an individual perspective. Has it worked out this season with the free agent signings yet? No, it definitely hasn't. And one thing that I'm sure Jared will ask Barry Trotz, because it is an interesting question, is this idea that they waived Dante Fabro and he goes to Columbus. He's getting a lot more ice time. He's making the most of that ice time. Philip Tomasino gets traded to the Pittsburgh Penguins. He's playing on the line with a future Hall of Famer in Evgeny Malkin. He's making the most of his opportunities. So it's easy to see that from afar and say, wait a minute. Philip Tomasino couldn't even crack this lineup. And now he's going to Pittsburgh and he's putting up points every game. It is a nuanced conversation. And I'm sure Jared will ask Barry about it later today. But has Barry Trotz's moves so far this season panned out? No, they have not.
I can't disagree with that at all. I think I would have to say with the Tomasino and Fabro, I'm glad for those guys. That happens around the league a lot.
How many chances did they get here to play those roles? Like I think like Tomasino, for example. He was drafted by David Poile. He made his NHL debut under John Hines. He was here for Barry Trotz and Andrew Brunette, and he couldn't get the most out of his opportunities for himself, despite having multiple people giving him those opportunities. It just didn't work out here.
These are maybe Tomasino will turn into a star player. Maybe, I don't know. I'd be happy for him if he did, but good for him. They weren't in this position they're in now because they weren't playing Fabro more or not playing Tomasino more. In my opinion, the way bigger issue is why isn't Stamkos playing better? Why isn't Marchessault playing better? What happened to all the guys that thrived last year? O'Reilly, Nyquist. Why have they dropped off? Why is Novak dropped off? That's 95% of everything. If you want to nitpick on Fabro and Tomasino, okay, whatever. But that's nothing compared to the issues that they're dealing with.
We have to be careful when we try to do the comparison. Well, this guy, you had him and you shipped him away or cut him, and look what he's doing at other organization. Listen, that's a hard thing to try to foresee. you've given, especially when you've given a guy or guys every opportunity to show you they can play. And for whatever reason, they just don't show you they can play within your system, within your organization. And you have no other recourse but to move on for them. You wish them well anywhere else, but you have to move on from them and get someone that can do the things that you're asking him to do. And that person may go on to have a stellar career somewhere else. But I am not going to continue to look at, well, they should have kept this guy. Well, they kept him long enough and they gave him every opportunity. It just didn't work. So we can't penalize him for, I can see if they had never gave these guys any chance and then they just traded them away. And then lo and behold, they become great players. It's like, you didn't even get our guy an opportunity and look what he became. But you've given these guys opportunities and they just didn't show it. So when you move on from them, you wish them luck, but you can't keep, going back to that and say, well, look at what these guys are doing for other teams. I've seen guys play well at one place and then go to another place and they don't play at all. I've seen guys not be able to touch the field for whatever reason, and they go somewhere else and they thrive. It's just how sports is at times.
CC on our text line says, Fabro had 5 years and Tomasino had 140-plus games with the Predators. How long was the organization supposed to give them?
Yeah. And I think that's part of it is their contract situations.
Mm-hmm.
The time was ticking. I thought they were going to trade Fabro a couple years ago. And if they did, I don't think anybody would have been clamoring, oh, my gosh, what are you thinking trading Fabro? He just became a guy who played for a long time in the league. He's a good player. He didn't live up to the reputation of great defensemen that the Predators have developed. He wasn't quite that, but he's a good, solid NHL player. But he's at the stage of his career where you got to pay him more to keep him. And they have other guys that can give him sort of the same thing that he was giving them for a lot less money. The Tomasino thing, if they wanted to not trade him, they would have had to waive him like Tolvanen, and somebody would have grabbed him for nothing. And they felt like the other prospects were better off as the guys that got the next chance, like a Svechkov and some of these other guys that I think in the coming weeks, if it doesn't turn, Barry Trotz' reference, you're going to start seeing Reed Schaefer. You're going to start seeing Joachim Kemmel, guys who they've been pretty high on for a while. They've already started to elevate Zach
Well, we
LaRue.
got about 2 weeks here.
Yeah, they've already started to elevate Zach
yeah.
LaRue up in the lineupe to give him some more
They have
ice time
7
here.
more games
7
until
more
Christmas.
games, yeah.
Until the Christmas break.
But the players on the ice they are what they are. I don't. There's a ton of questions as to why they've struggled, but they have struggled mightily, and we'll see if it happens tonight. But they're running out of time, saying, "Oh, we'll just turn it around. We'll be all right." They've dug such a hole. It's going to take something with a lot of force to start happening that we haven't seen so far.
Predators and Flames tonight. Puck drop at 7, pregame at 6, right here on 102.5, 106.3 The Game. The Predators looking to break their 7-game winless streak, their longest in more than 11 years. We'll see if they can do that against the Flames tonight. Stillman and Company coming up next, right here on 102.5, 106.3 The Game.
Be love on your people. Have a wonderful, blessed, and safe Tuesday. Peace.
Close.